Welcome to the Fantasy Audiobook, Wizards of the Marvel Universe. Chapter 81. Seeing the red tank stuck in the quagmire, everyone gasped. This is a humanoid tank, and it was resolved like this. But this surprise didn't have time to fill their minds. A trembling sound of crisis appeared in their hearts. As if being stared at by an ancient beast, everyone's eyes turned to the figure that suddenly appeared in front of them. But at this moment, the figure gradually blurred, and then turned into a residual image and dissipated on the spot. When it appeared again, it suddenly appeared in front of a figure. Ah! A cry of surprise came out of his mouth. At such a close distance, although his body was ready to fight back, he felt as if his heart was grabbed by an invisible hand when he was stared at by the pair of strange golden vertical pupils. He could not help but stand there, unable to move at all. Then, a pitch-black magic wand occupied his entire field of vision. Bang! A faint light suddenly shot out from the end of the wand, accompanied by his faint words, Avada Kedavra. He could not move at all, and could only watch the green light shoot into his mind silently. Bang! The pupils filled with fear could not help but lose their minds, and then the whole stiff body could not help but fall to the ground behind. Ah! Stop! Seeing Yan Chen kill a life with his own hands, everyone could not help but be indignant. After all, everyone was a ruthless person, and each of them had dozens of lives on their hands. After experiencing the initial shock, everyone reacted and rushed forward. Bang! A figure rushed over like a wild bull. The tall and strong figure suddenly flashed, and then split into two identical clones. The separated figure flashed again, and turned into four. Whoosh! Then more and more figures continued to appear. In a blink of an eye, there were dozens of identical figures. Doppelganger. Yan Chen stood there, looking at the enemies that were coming to hunt him, but he was not annoyed or angry. Compared with the poor technological effects of the mysterious man, the avatars evolved by the person in front of him were vivid and real. If he was hit by him, he would definitely suffer some damage. Prepare to die. The words said in unison seemed to turn into a thunder, booming in the ears. Yan Chen smiled and said, "Then let's see who goes first." Before he finished speaking, a red firework suddenly appeared in his pupils. The clones just came to Yan Chen. Bang! An inexplicable firework emerged from their bodies, and suddenly, a whimpering sound was heard, and a gust of wind blew fiercely from the venue. The wind borrowed the fire, and the fire helped the wind. Bang bang! The clones that had just hunted in the shape of a fan, suddenly dissipated on the spot like smoke, and there was a large amount of white smoke floating in the air in the venue. Impossible! A cry of surprise came from the clone who had only one body left. Just as Yan Chen was about to end this person's life with fire again. Don't even think about it. A cry of surprise came from a distance. Then, there was a sudden explosion sound in her ears, and a figure instantly jumped into her eyes. Fast. Incomparably fast. Then the Night Walker, who was able to move at super high speed, quickly threw a punch. Looking at the calm face in front of her, her heart couldn't help but jump, and then the sight in his pupils actually looked here. This guy. She actually reacted. As this thought flashed through her mind, the Night Walker's fist had already pressed down hard, but a red cloak suddenly blocked her body. Boom! The soft fabric became unexpectedly solid during the touch. Not only did the terrifying force not break the cloak apart, but the Night Walker took a few steps back due to the sudden recoil and fell to the ground. Impossible! What kind of fabric is this? It's both soft and hard. And it can even prevent my fist from penetrating. Before the Night Girl was completely shocked, she suddenly found that her body was petrified where it was in contact with the ground. Soon, this marble-like skin suddenly rose and spread. I can't move. My whole body actually began to petrify. Feeling the petrification that had spread to her neck, the Night Girl couldn't help but beg, "Wait. I am willing to serve you as my master. Please, I am willing to do anything." Yan Chen seemed to ignore her and just slowly looked around the entire museum. As his eyes swept, the clone just now was still not immune to the disaster. Soon a flame had risen directly on his body surface. Buzz! Under the rising flame, Yan Chen's attack had not yet stopped. A figure beside him suddenly hung upside down in the air. Another figure instantly had more than a dozen bloodstains on his body and fell to the ground. Another figure was completely frozen. Another figure hiding in the dark, preparing to ambush someone, suddenly expanded like a balloon, and then exploded. Silent spell. Wandless spell. Elemental power. As the silent spells were released one after another, everyone on the field suddenly encountered a disaster that could be called a doomsday robbery. In the blink of an eye, more than a dozen Brotherhood members on the field instantly lost their fighting power. As the frozen people suddenly exploded, the entire scene was left with only the red tank stuck in the mud. The petrification only spread to the Nightwalker's chin. Yan Chen glanced at her and said, "Prove your worth." In addition to the stupid red tank who only had brute force, he didn't want to leave any other lives in this battle. The Nightwalker swallowed and said with a trembling voice, "Not only can I move at super high speed, but I am also a radar that senses abilities. I can find other people with abilities." Oh, Yan Chen sighed with interest. No wonder this woman dared to say this before she died. Her ability is indeed enough to be considered a magical treasure. Moreover, it is a bit necessary for the subsequent plan. This is why he left the red tank. As soon as the voice fell, the petrified skin on the night girl's body suddenly faded away, and then she stood up straight with a little stiffness, and bowed respectfully to Yan Chen. A series of fine noises were continuously emitted from the museum below. Magneto, who was at the upper level of the statue, frowned, and a bad mood came to his mind. Soon, the noise below quickly receded like a tide, and no sound was heard again. "Let's go and see what's going on." Magneto suppressed his anger and said indignantly. There was a sudden sound coming from below. But he couldn't figure out whether his people had encountered a disaster or the enemy had killed them. Toad gritted his teeth, his expression a little shaky, then he said calmly, "Don't worry. There is a red tank on the floor below. That guy's physical strength is simply invincible, how could he let anyone in?" But seeing Magneto's still unhappy expression, Toad swallowed his saliva and added, "I'll go down and take a look." After a burst of fine footsteps, Toad dragged a few people and rushed down from the corridor. Although Professor Charles and the ex-cops had been secretly knocked unconscious by him, Magneto's depression had not yet dissipated. After years of adventure, he naturally trained a tight mind, and then rushed to the top of the Statue of Liberty without hesitation. Buzz! He raised his hands in vain, and a magnetic wave bloomed from his palms. Then he took advantage of the Earth's magnetic field and slowly flew to the torch in the hand of the Statue of Liberty, where a radiation machine and the captured little naughty boy were arranged. Everything is ready. In order to avoid more trouble, Magneto immediately prepared for the last step. In the dark little house just now, the tied-up X-Men looked at each other in bewilderment. Cyclops Scott said, "Who's here?" The sound of the fierce fighting below just now undoubtedly indicated that someone was trying to come in. And it was undoubtedly a teammate on their side. Professor Charles. Impossible, he was still in a coma and recovering from his injuries. Then did anyone else from the entire X-Men come? But those who were tied up were basically the elites of the X-Men. Aren't the others here just to be fed? Storm suddenly asked in confusion, "Have you told S.H.I.E.L.D.? Scott responded directly and bluntly, "We mutants don't need outsiders to interfere." "Of course, I won't tell others easily." Storm couldn't help but sigh after hearing this, but she thought of the phone call she made to Dr. Helen Zhao yesterday, but she only told him some of the reasons. And she couldn't come, right? Logan still roared slightly, trying to struggle out of the metal chain tied to his body. Among them, only Jean Grey had a complicated expression, and even a hint of surprise in her pupils. Feeling the phoenix waves surging from her body, she whispered as softly as a mosquito, "It's him." However, no one present heard her words. There are some corridors inside the Statue of Liberty. Ta ta ta. The sound of restless footsteps came from the corridor. "Hurry up, hurry up, hurry up." The voices of urging followed. Toad led a group of Brotherhood members and hurried to the museum below. Although he didn't think anything had happened, he took Magneto's order as an imperial decree. At this time, there was also a crisp sound coming from the stairs below. But under the cover of everyone's footsteps, it was not very clear. Toad's heart beat inexplicably, and his strong hearing sense allowed him to actually capture this mosquito-like sound. "Stop it!" Then, he couldn't help but shout. Hearing Toad's order, the fraternity members next to him couldn't help but stand still on the stairs. The atmosphere on the scene suddenly fell into silence. Everyone's body was motionless, as if time had frozen here. I'm afraid that if a needle fell to the ground, you could hear the crisp sound. Click. The sound of footsteps landing on the ground came from below without any concealment. Everyone's pupils shrank suddenly. Someone really walked up from the entrance of the corridor. But is he an enemy or a friend? Suddenly, someone shouted, "Fellow fraternity members, give me an answer quickly." In this enclosed space, the sound was very loud and resounding due to the enhancement of the echo. But when the sound completely fell back, there was still no response. Silence. A dead silence. Everyone's heart was scared. Is this not a joke? The newcomer must be an enemy. And he is the one who broke through the defenses of Red Tank, Doppelganger, Nightwalker and others. Thinking of a group of mutants with outstanding talents being defeated by him, everyone's faces were filled with fear. Suddenly, click, another sound of footsteps sounded, breaking the quiet atmosphere. Click, the footsteps did not stop, and they still rushed upstairs with great determination. Moreover, compared with the last time, the footsteps this time were half a point thicker, as if the newcomer was much closer and more sudden. Suddenly someone said, "No. He is jumping and teleporting forward." As soon as the voice fell, it immediately caused an uproar. At this time, everyone realized that the footsteps transmitted from the corridor were not continuous but progressive jumps. Click. Along with an even clearer sound of footsteps, Yan Chen's faint words followed, "Correct answer." Then, his figure directly caused a ripple in the air, and then slowly appeared from the void. Everyone took a deep breath, looking at this figure that suddenly appeared in front of them, and inexplicably felt their breathing stagnate, especially the pair of strange golden vertical pupils. When their eyes met those pupils, they felt a kind of pressure as if they had encountered a natural enemy, and their whole body even trembled and shook, unable to move at all. "Don't look at him." Toad took a deep breath, woke up from the suffocation, and reminded them. But it was too late. Whoosh! A gust of wind suddenly blew through the air. Then, the wind splashing in the ears turned into invisible blades, constantly cutting into the bodies of the Brotherhood members, and the sound of flesh and blood being cut kept coming out. Ah! Ah! Heart-wrenching sounds echoed one after another, but with the ruthless cutting of the shadowless sword, figures soon fell down one after another. In the extreme danger, the Toad was agile and stuck to the ceiling wall. But before he had time to rejoice, Yan Chen had already arrived under him, and then the black magic wand in his hand emitted a faint light. Avada Kedavra! The figure of the Toad hanging on the ceiling instantly fell to the ground with a plop, and then continued to roll down the stairs. The blood flowing on the ground further fueled the momentum of the fall. Buzz! An inexplicable gust of wind blew through the entrance of the corridor. Accompanied by a continuous whimpering sound, the red cloak behind Yan Chen swayed like a flame, and then the figure disappeared on the spot. The torch in the hand of the Statue of Liberty. A high-tech radiation machine is placed high up on it. With the advantage of being high in the air, Magneto wants to use this radiation wave to cover the entire island where the global summit is held. If possible, he can even spread this radiation wave to the entire city of New York. At that time, not only will most of the powerful people in the world become mutants, but even the top economic cities on the entire Earth will probably all become mutants. The trend of mutants will be at its peak. And he will become the uncrowned king of this new order. Magneto thought secretly in his heart. But all this still requires this little girl to hold on. Magneto looked at the underage girl in front of him with a childish face and couldn't help but reveal a sinister smile. Then he slowly said, "The ceremony begins. The new order and new era of mutants will be born tonight, and you, little rascal, are honored to be the first witness of the new order. Of course, you will also be a sacrificer." Magneto added in his heart. No, the little rascal who was tied to the seat, had her pupils shrank slightly and let out a scream of fear. Magneto ignored her and then reached out to touch her head. As soon as his palms touched, swish, a terrifying absorption force was instantly generated from the little rascal's face, and then all kinds of energy in Magneto's body, like a bursting dam, continuously flowed into the little rascal's body. At the same time, the little rascal's hands were also pressed on the instrument, and the energy in her body flowed to the radiation machine at an even more terrifying speed. In the blink of an eye, a strand of her smooth black hair had been completely dyed white. Magneto then let go of his hand. The loss of some of his abilities reduced his combat effectiveness by half, but looking at the radiation fluctuations emerging in the sky, he couldn't help laughing. Ha ha ha, the great work of the mutants will be completed tonight. The radiation wave initially rolled up like a thick fog, but under the continuous supply of the little rascal, the entire condensed fog actually slowly swept away like a wave. This is a strange phenomenon in the world. People who were holding a global summit not far away also saw this scene. The rolling wave fluctuations instantly made the nerves of these powerful people tense. The speech was interrupted, and he was escorted out by the anxious N. There was an uproar in the venue, and everyone couldn't sit still. Under the protection of the bodyguards, they also ran out. Only one woman was still sitting alone, quietly looking at the Statue of Liberty in the distance. Although it was impossible to see anything in the hazy night, Helen must know that under that sky, there must be a tall figure standing in the air, fulfilling his promise and defeating the enemy in his heart. For this, Helen is willing to wait here, even if it means sacrificing her life. Looking at the pale white radiation waves that kept rolling in like waves, Helen's pupils were full of determination. She knew what would happen if she was swept by the radiation waves. After all, genetic mutation to become a mutant is an extremely low probability event, and genetic collapse is the norm. Being swept by this radiation wave is basically a dead end for most people. But Helen still looked at this scene calmly. The man in her heart would definitely stop all this. As if to respond to the call from the bottom of her heart. Suddenly, boom, there was a roar in the air. The white mist that had been slowly rolling in just now gradually blurred and faded, and then with a bang, it disappeared into thin air. Then, from the Statue of Liberty, a faint roar floated out. The torch of the Statue of Liberty. Sparks kept flying. At the same time, a crackling symphony of electric currents came out from the radiation machine, and the radiation fluctuations just created were completely dissipated due to the machine failure, and the dying little rascal also saved his life. Before he completely fell into a coma, outside of his blurred vision, a slender figure stood in the void and saved himself. But, before he could see the face clearly, the little rascal could no longer hold on and slowly closed his eyes. Crack, the clenched fists made a sound, and Magneto's face was full of collapse. Just now he was in a dreamland, dreaming that he would become the uncrowned king of the new world and new order. But the next second, he woke up. Looking at this shaky, sparking radiation machine, Magneto knew that he had completely woken up. Beast, he uttered angrily. Then, the metal structure beside him began to twist and swell, as if it had life, and kept swaying around Magneto. Beast, who are you? How dare you destroy my life's work? Looking at the young man floating in the air in front of him, Magneto roared in his heart. It was him who destroyed the new world and even the new order that was within his reach. Buzz. The magic floating cloak behind him made a rustling sound in the night wind. Yan Chen's figure stood in the air. He just destroyed the machine by chance. A pair of black and white pupils looked at the old man in the purple cloak in front of him with interest, and couldn't help sighing, "Are you Magneto?" Puff. Magneto almost vomited a mouthful of blood. This young man is not sure who he is. He destroyed the radiation machine that laid the foundation for his career. You. Don't react so strongly, I was only joking. Then who are you? Magneto suppressed his anger. When he thought of the noise just now, he realized that it was probably this guy who did it. Thinking of this, he became alert and the magnetic field fluctuations in his body became more and more intense. Who am I? A person who is not worth mentioning. He is also the one who wants to take your life. As soon as the words fell, a red flame totem appeared in Yan Chen's pupils. At the same time, there was a piercing sound of breaking through the air, and a stream of wind blew away. Phoenix flames. God's sword is invisible, double-barreled. The Phoenix fireworks were invisible and traceless, and appeared out of thin air with only the focus of Yan Chen's sight. So it can be regarded as one of Yan Chen's killer moves. But I didn't expect that when the silent fireworks rose up, Magneto had already reacted, and his whole body instantly moved several meters horizontally, and where he just stopped, a burst of blazing fireworks suddenly appeared out of thin air. Before I had time to relax, the wind around Magneto's ears suddenly became messy, and his white hair was blown a little messy. Under this refreshing wind, he could smell the crisis behind him. Don't even think about it. When the wind was about to touch his body, Magneto's mind exploded, and a strong sense of vigilance came over him. Without any hesitation, the magnetic field fluctuations in his body could not help but surge. Buzz. The refreshing night breeze that was gentle just now suddenly became like an invisible blade, trying to impose it on Magneto's body, but at this moment, metal shields suddenly surrounded him. Clang! The surface of the silver metal shield suddenly had a series of hideous scratches, and then, the wind became more and more fierce, like rain hitting banana leaves, crackling on the shield non-stop. Crack! A fine cracking sound came from the shield, and then the entire metal shield was on the verge of breaking. How is it possible? Magneto roared in his heart again. He knew very well how strong the metal shield he had built was, but he didn't expect that it would still not be able to withstand this terrifying invisible blade. But how could he just sit there and wait? No matter how much strength the radiation machine had consumed, he was still the real king after all. In other words, Magneto. The magnetic field fluctuations spreading in the body reached a peak, and even substantial ripples were produced in the air. Then, the metal shield outside the body became tighter and stronger, and the shield that was broken just now was instantly restored to its original state. Whoosh! The wind blew past, and the last invisible blade chopped down, but it only left a white mark on the metal surface. The attack of Shenfeng Wang also came to an end for the time being. Following the Phoenix fireworks at the beginning, Magneto actually dodged 2 killing moves in a row. These 2 moves, but in Yan Chen's historical record, have always been successful and have become a trick to kill others in seconds. Magneto, who has been fighting all his life, still dodged these 2 consecutive tricks with his rich experience and extremely terrifying metal manipulation power. Then, Magneto's voice also came from under the metal shield. "Young man, you are very strong. I have to say that the killing move just now was really beautiful. But, unfortunately, that's all. I, Magneto, have been in the business for decades, and I have encountered countless mutants and assassins, not to mention those with strange abilities. Do you think you can kill them with just the little trick you just used? I tell you, it's impossible." Before he finished speaking, the metal shield floating in front slowly withdrew. Magneto wanted to see the face of the young man just now. Of course, he wanted to see his panic expression more. The metal shield surrounding him remained motionless, carefully protecting against possible surprise attacks. But just as a small piece of metal shield in front of his sight withdrew, what came into view was not a slender figure standing, but a terrifying and huge dragon shadow standing in the void. Roar! A roar burst out from the dragon's mouth. The terrifying sound even sent a few ripples in the air. Magneto was stunned, and his shock was hard to hide. His smug look had long disappeared. Where was the young man? How did he become a huge dragon? Then he looked at the night sky around him, but he only saw the mirrors in the distance suddenly disappear. What is this? Before he could figure it out. 2 huge inverted triangle scales opened up, and then with a bang, the dragon that was suspended in the air just now unfolded its smooth body lines, and then rushed over. Seeing this scene, there was no way to hide. Magneto's eyes were dead, and his heart was alert. The magnetic field fluctuations in his body exploded to the extreme, and the surrounding metal materials were constantly pulled out by him. Soon, pieces of metal shields were constantly formed to guard in front of him. But at this moment, bang! The dragon pounced directly on the giant metal cocoon in front of it, slowly opened its bloody mouth, and exhaled a breath of fire that had been brewing for a long time, which turned into a terrifying pillar of fire and poured directly on the metal lump in front of it. Pieces of metal melted and dissipated quickly. No matter how Magneto inside rebuilt, he couldn't catch up with the speed of melting. Just as the breath of fire was still corroding the metal shield. Bang! The ferocious giant claw had already pushed the waves and directly tore the annoying metal lump in front of him. Just as Magneto was stunned, another giant claw directly pinched his body in the palm of his hand. Crack! Magneto's bones were immediately broken by this grip. "I'll break your head, no kidding." The dragon actually spoke human words. Magneto's pale pupils were even more stunned. It was this guy. Then the whole person was completely separated from the head under the grip of his claws. Boom! A breath of fire sprayed out again, and instantly the body was completely irrigated and melted. After doing all this, the black shadow of the dragon in the night sky instantly turned into a human form, and Yan Chen's figure stood in the void again. Now at this time, he can change the shape of the dragon to send and receive at will. Looking at the little naughty who was still unconscious below, Yan Chen planned to leave, because the fluctuations of the radiation machine just now were about to usher in a lot of people's attention. Crack! The sound of mirrors shattering suddenly came from all around. Before Yan Chen left, he felt the fluctuations coming from Jean Grey below, and a strange color came from his eyes. After suppressing the heat and restlessness brought by the dragon blood, his whole figure completely dissipated in the night sky. And below, the imprisoned ex-police, with the efforts of Wolverine, successfully freed Magneto from his metal chains. They had already heard the roar of the beast just now, and they were all shocked on the spot. Which beast was fighting Magneto? But when they cast their eyes on the torch of the goddess statue, they only saw the figure of the little rascal, and the iron lumps were scattered in piles. It was obvious that the battle was over. Who is it? Considering the noise below and the roar of the beast just now, it is obvious that it was done by the same person. Storm said directly. But what is certain is that they are definitely not our enemies. They could be ours, friend. After hearing this, Qin Jie Lei was silent, because she knew that the call and desire in her heart must be caused by that person. Crackle. There was a sound like burning wood in the air. Helen, who was still sitting alone in the field, raised her head when she heard the familiar sound. Her eyes were full of spring water and she looked at the scene in front of her. Soon, driven by a ripple in the air, a figure walked out of the void. Yan Chen. With a burst of exclamations, Helen's slender body flew directly into Yan Chen's arms like a swallow flying into the forest. Please, your man is very powerful. Yan Chen felt the body temperature in his arms and patted her back gently to comfort her, which made her worried for a while. However, it was also because Helen didn't know herself well enough. After all, her dragon and phoenix transformation forms had never been fully revealed in front of her, so she was not as relaxed and generous as Susan. I was so worried about it, Helen said with some emotion. Then, after listening to his words, her face turned red, her heart trembled, and then she said in a voice as soft as a mosquito, "Who is your woman?" How shameless. Yan Chen smiled when he heard this, and used his hands to slightly force her so that she couldn't break free from his arms. Then he said, "You were the one who kissed me just now. Now you want to leave with a sneer." Nonsense. Helen felt even more shy after hearing this, and she felt embarrassed when she thought about her previous behavior. After the two of them had a big fight, Yan Chen still took advantage of her and kissed her perfectly. Compared to the brief kiss just now it was tender and lingering for a long time. The sirens outside have been loud. The National Police Force has arrived late. In the distance, the ex-police have also boarded their Blackbird fighter jets and are ready to leave. Although they have not made any contribution, they have completed this mission. However, Magneto's death has made them stunned for a long time. Looking at the Blackbird that has perfectly entered the invisible state and gradually soared away, Yan Chen also made up his mind to go home. Let's go. After Yan Chen took Helen's hand, the two of them disappeared in an instant. They returned home. Just when Helen was taking a bath, Yan Chen also went to Susan's parents' home, ready to take her home. And at this time, Yan Chen also met Susan's parents for the first time. In addition, there was also her younger brother, Thunderbolt, whom she had met many times. Susan's family assets were above the middle class. Although there were no tens of billions of US dollars in assets, there were more than a dozen billion assets at least. It was also considered a wealthy family, and they were doing well in New York City. However, even though he was a great wizard, he had to get along with many adults. Although he has dealt with creatures before, even if his age in the previous life and his current age are added together, he is not as old as Susan's father. In fact, he is still just a teenager. After chatting with each other in a familiar manner, Susan's brother Thunderbolt couldn't sit still. After all, he had also seen Yan Chen's ability to teleport. What's more, he defeated that arrogant Tom, so Thunderbolt looked at Yan Chen with a bit of awe. It just so happened that the topic of discussion turned to this troublemaking guy. Susan's father, Franklin Storm, angrily, "This little guy Johnny still needs your brother-in-law to discipline him. Susan is annoyed enough by him." Of course, Yan Chen agreed immediately. "Johnny, did you hear that? And don't abuse your abilities. If you hurt your family, I won't let you go," Franklin warned him. Puff. At this time, Thunderbolt almost spit out the tea in his mouth. My sister's boyfriend disciplines me. Oh my god. This is a joke. Looking at the sight cast by Yan Chen, he was not as domineering and generous as he was outside. He immediately grabbed his head and said respectfully, "Please take care of me in the future." Franklin looked at this scene and felt a little strange. When did this kid become so polite? Soon after Yan Chen chatted about some things here, he declined the kindness of Susan's mother and led Susan back home. At the door, Thunderbolt was still waving his arms patiently. Looking at her brother's performance, Susan couldn't help but chuckle and said, "You have controlled my brother." Yan Chen also knew that the last time he saved him, he left an indelible impression on him, so he let him put away his previous mischievous nature. "Okay, let's go home." After holding Susan's hand, the two of them returned home in an instant. The night was getting darker. After the three of them exchanged greetings for a while, they went back to their rooms to sleep. However, after chatting in the bedroom for a while, the figures of Yan Chen and Susan overlapped with each other. Hualala. In the night, a fine drizzle suddenly fell from the sky. It was late at night, and the sky suddenly began to drizzle again, so that there were no pedestrians wandering outside. In the city of New York, a slender and graceful figure not only did not bring an umbrella, but still ran quickly on the road, and the sound of footsteps kept stomping on the ground. Paw! On the puddle of water in front of her, her footsteps landed hard, but a puddle of water splashed, covering the stockings wrapped around her slender long legs. But even so, this figure did not stop, and continued to run on this remote path. Ho ho ho! The running lady sighed with heavy breathing, but still gritted her teeth and continued to run. Tired, really too tired, but at this time, the figure chasing behind her was unwilling to let her go. A gust of cold wind blew through the alley, and the buzzing sound of sobbing continued to echo in the alley. Soon, a figure suddenly appeared at the entrance of the street. Under the dim light, her good figure curves could still be seen. "Don't run. The world is so big, can you still hide from my pursuit?" Accompanied by the sound of footsteps, the figure came out from the darkness. It was Yan Chen's newly recruited subordinate, the Night Walker. Looking at the pitiful woman in front of her, dressed in student clothes, the Night Walker couldn't help but sigh, "The master is not willing to let you run away. Moreover, this may be her own token of allegiance." Then, her uncertain look became firm, "Die for me. You can't escape from my palm at all." In her induction and recognition of mutant abilities, no matter who Mystique becomes, she can't hide it. As she took a few steps forward, the face of Mystique in front of her showed a bitter expression. Just when she thought she was going to die, a righteous voice sounded from a distance, "No one can cause trouble in Hell's Kitchen." Now for a news report. Last night, an unknown phenomenon occurred at the Statue of Liberty. As a result, the global summit was hastily concluded. According to General Stryker, this was a terrorist attack caused by the Brotherhood of Mutants. But the official has not made any statement, and no one has confirmed this conclusion. The TV was broadcasting the news from last night. Obviously, mutants were not involved in this incident, but it was not known whether it was due to multiple considerations or there was no evidence. "Oh," Susan sighed with interest, and then said to the figure in front of the TV, "General William Stryker, this is a ruthless man. It can be said that like Senator Kelly, he is an extremely hateful guy against mutants." Helen, who was wearing a cotton silk pajamas, also lay on the sofa in the living room and said, "Not only that. This person's reputation is not very good. It is said that this guy has a secret underground under his command. The laboratory has many mutant experimental specimens." After Helen finished speaking, her eyebrows were slightly frowned. She had heard from many colleagues that the experimenters under Stryker were very keen on human experiments. Human experiments. Behind this term, many mutants died in human dissection experiments. Such a cruel and vicious person. Even if Susan and the others were not mutants, they could not attract their neutrality and goodwill, and even made them extremely disgusted. Listening to their accusations, Yan Chen looked at the slightly fat general after hearing the words, and then he didn't pay much attention to it, just curious. After all, he himself is not a mutant, and the bad guys in the world can never be killed. Then, after he had lunch with Susan, he went back alone. Arriving at the meditation room, he continued his meditation practice. Still using the more basic elemental magic at the beginning, after thoroughly digesting the wind element, fire element, water element, earth element and other elements. Yan Chen also touched upon the less popular elements of light and darkness. Afterwards, the elemental energies in the world were soon thoroughly mastered by Yan Chen's enchanting talent. As a result, he already had a general systematic understanding of the most basic structural elements of the world, and many of the doubts he had in the past suddenly became clear. And now, he began to explore another clever, but more profound use of the elements. If the extraction of individual elements from the energy of heaven and earth is a more difficult threshold to enter, then the combination of two or more elements is even more profound and complicated. Now, Yan Chen has officially entered another more profound door. Open double-angle bracket scripts manuscript, adjusted the memory of his previous self in the past. It happened that he had also read a book about the use of combined magic, so soon, Yan Chen rushed to this memory scene. At the beginning, it was natural to study the door. To suddenly extract two elements of power for one's own use from the complicated and turbid energy of heaven and earth, it is another more profound method. This threshold alone has blocked more than half of the mages who can only extract one element of power. Originally, extracting one element of power alone has blocked more than half of the mages. So it can be seen how difficult it is for a mage to practice, and what is more terrifying is that not every mage has an affinity for a certain element. Of course, in addition to the so-called threshold, it is really difficult to stump Yan Chen's terrifying and evil magic talent. Wow, the sound of pages turning can't help but be heard. After half an hour, the past self was still immersed in studying the magic content of this page, and Yan Chen had already understood it and was silently waiting for him to turn the page. Then, he began to perform the magic combination he had just presented. Hand gestures, spells. The changes in the content were much more complicated and difficult, and the beating of each magic syllable had to match the changes in the hand gestures perfectly. And Yan Chen had already begun to master it slowly after several tentative attempts. Buzz. A gust of wind suddenly blew through the library. Hissing. There was even a hint of wind and sand in the air, and the collision of sand and gravel produced a harsh whimpering sound. What was being cultivated now was the combination of wind and earth elements. What was even more clever was that the combination of these two elements could produce a new magnetic attribute. This was exactly the same as the ability of Magneto that I met yesterday. Magnetic force is rising. Yan Chen sighed silently, with a gleam of light flashing in his eyes. Manhattan City. In a slightly shabby abandoned factory. Several figures were standing inside, but they were standing on both sides, and there was even some distance between them. One with broad and thick black wings was undoubtedly the Vulture, and next to him was a middle-aged man in a black shirt, who was the accompanying Sandman. At this time, they stood aside, looking at the two people opposite with a little confusion. The Vulture wiped his hands, like a butler full of flattery, looking at the two people opposite and said, "If you two are not mistaken, you are also new members of my men. Coincidentally, I happen to be the first member of my subordinates." After saying that, he patted his body and looked very proud. The Sandman on the side looked at him with great contempt. This was the first time for him to hear someone being so happy and proud of being a lackey. Of course, the Sandman was in urgent need of money, so after repeated persuasion from the Vulture, he joined Yan Chen's team. The two people opposite were the Night Walker and the Red Tank. Compared to the ignorant Red Tank, whose brain was full of violent genes, the Night Walker was not feeling well at this time, because she messed up one thing, that is, the pursuit last night, which actually let Mystique escape completely. Of course, if he hadn't come to Hell's Kitchen and happened to meet Daredevil, he wouldn't have missed it. Even with super high-speed movement, it didn't work at all when he met that guy who could be called a human radar. On the contrary, he suffered a great loss because of his low fighting skills. The Night Walker gritted her teeth, but she didn't know how to explain to her new master, so she didn't have much time to pay attention to the Vulture's flattering words. Not long after, suddenly, the air and light in the venue suddenly became a little blurry and tortuous. Then, in the interweaving of light and shadow, a figure gradually emerged. Then, in the interweaving of light, Yan Chen's figure appeared in the blurred light. "Owner, Grandpa," one after another, voices were transmitted from this abandoned factory. Of course, everyone's eyes could not help but feel puzzled, because the figure of Yan Chen in front of them seemed a little distorted and blurry, but in the blink of an eye, this feeling quickly disappeared. Yan Chen did not pay attention to their greetings at first. In the vast deep sky that they could not see, a galaxy of stars suddenly bloomed with some light, and then his consciousness became extremely clear. Celestial star magic. Astral projection. This is also one of the magics that Yan Chen learned when he delved into the power of celestial stars. Project a part of one's own human consciousness to various places in the distance and even in the dimensional field. However, Yan Chen's main body is still practicing magic in the meditation room, which can be regarded as a method of doing several things at once. Looking at the men who came in front of him, Yan Chen's eyes lit up and he said, "Very good, you are all here." At this time, the Night Walker, who was hesitant to speak, stood up with a very ugly face, and then said in a low and aggrieved tone, "Last night, the demon girl ran away. Of course, if it weren't for the daredevil from Hell's Kitchen who interfered. Moreover, her radar-like recognition and sensing ability is also limited in range, and Mystique has completely left this range, making it very difficult for her to find her." "Okay, I got it." Yan Chen interrupted her directly. As for Mystique, he didn't care much about her. After all, she was not a threat to him at all, and under the magic of the sealing pliers, she couldn't reveal her information. After solving the Brotherhood of Mutants, the most important task now is to find out the other mastermind, the Green Goblin. The Brotherhood came to hunt Helen down again and again, but now he has completely destroyed it. Since he has noticed that the Green Goblin has something to do with the Osborne group, Yan Chen will not let him go. The primary target now is the Osborne group. I don't care what methods you use to harass me, just lure out that Green Goblin for me. Also, Vulture, you and Sandman, try to contact Green Goblin and lure him out. After listening to Yan Chen's instructions, Vulture wiped his hands, immediately agreed with joy on his face, and said, "Don't worry, Master. Although I have only met the Green Goblin a few times, his ability is just ordinary. Compared with you, he is far inferior. As long as you take action yourself, you will definitely be able to capture him." Then, there was another round of flattering words of praise. Yan Chen waved his hand impatiently. After some things happened, he didn't say any more pleasantries. Then his whole body disappeared like a cloud of mist. The people who were left looked at each other. Mystique was relieved. After all, the thing she was worried about didn't happen after all. Of course, it made her hate Mystique even more. In her heart, she planned to search everywhere in New York City for a while. Of course, after the haze in her heart dissipated, Mystique discussed the next plan with them in a good tone. After all, the Osborne group is not a group that can be easily messed with. Naturally, they have to be more cautious in the next action. At the duplex villa, in the meditation room, Yan Chen's body was suspended in the middle of the room. With each breath, ripples appeared in the air. This was the tide of the elements of heaven and earth. At this time, a wisp of discrete consciousness, along with the dimming and extinction of the Milky Way starlight somewhere in space, returned to his flesh and blood body from the distant factory. Astral projection. This magic belonging to celestial bodies and stars is very useful. No matter how far away, a wisp of consciousness can be projected to the local area. This is also one of the magics he learned a long time ago when he was involved in the power of celestial bodies and stars. After explaining the matter, Yan Chen's mind returned to the practice of compound element magic again. With the chanting of spells in his mouth and the coordination of gestures. Quote. Metal spirit, answer my call. As the last spell fell, the surrounding metal objects responded to his call and trembled as if they had life. Lamps, iron boxes, steel decks, all the metal objects in the room were shaking. As Yan Chen's thoughts flashed, the iron box flew over and circulated in his body like a celestial body. Then the whole box collapsed and melted, turning into the purest iron liquid and began to plasticize. Sometimes it turned into a metal blade, and sometimes it turned into a small metal shield. It was totally unexpected that this was still the small iron box just now. Then, as Yan Chen's thoughts flashed again, the metal blade in his palm returned to the original iron box and slowly flew back to the original position. The iron box fell on the windowsill. At the same time, the magnetic fluctuations that were looming in the air suddenly disappeared, and the connection that was just established on the metal object was instantly broken. Yan Chen breathed a sigh of relief, thinking about the scene just now, but he was very satisfied. This was the composite magic of the wind element and the earth element, which produced an alternative magnetic magic attribute and also gave him the ability to control magnetism. This is really a coincidental use. Speaking of which, Yan Chen had this kind of inspiration, which was still due to his previous use of magic. After all, he used the spell of wind and fire to kill the enemy, and he had witnessed the powerful effect of fire borrowing wind with his own eyes. So, he had the idea of composite element magic. What's more coincidental is that in the library of Kamaji Mausoleum, there were ancestors who summarized such experience, combined with some ancient methods, and even drew a handwritten notebook. However, because of the high threshold and the affinity to the elements, many mages are basically blocked from the door. This is simply an endless treasure trove. After all, in the conventional impression of most people, the power of heaven and earth elements is the most basic spell, which is far inferior to the power of celestial stars and even the top power of ancient gods. But no one thought that this composite element magic power could reach such a height. Yan Chen's mind flashed through a series of magic. Explosion attribute, the combination of thunder element and earth element. Wood attribute, the combination of water element and earth element. Soon, he continued to immerse himself in the next practice. In a factory dedicated to weapons processing, wisps of smoke suddenly rose. Then, a series of explosions echoed mercilessly inside, destroying and damaging the equipment and machines on the assembly line worth tens of millions of dollars, along with the raw materials in them. Stop, you! Roaring sounds were constantly emitted from the security guards inside. Besides, a weapons manufacturing factory had many security guards equipped with heavy weapons. The exaggerated heavy machine guns and even high-altitude cannons made Vulture's eyelids jump. If it were in the past, he would definitely not seek a bullet hole, but now it is different. He came with the sincerity of his master. Jihieji. What responded to them was a hideous laugh. The Vulture poured a bottle of invisibility potion into his mouth, and after the huge mechanical wings spread out, his whole body suddenly disappeared from the air, and then he left easily from the sky without a trace. Pretend to be awesome and then run away, how exciting! The Vulture said with a laugh. The people below immediately held their guns and stared at the giant bird that suddenly disappeared from the sky in amazement. Everyone looked at each other, and they couldn't figure out what happened just now. So, did he disappear from the sky? A security guard rubbed his eyes, but he couldn't see the rampant giant bird at all. Hey, what's going on? Crack. After a series of metallic crackling sounds, the entire signboard of Osborne Weapons Manufacturer was completely torn apart. It turned out that the Vultures did not forget to smash their signboard before leaving. At the same time, compared with the Vultures who were wreaking havoc, the Sand People were preparing to rob money for economic reasons. Hiss hiss hiss. The air was filled with yellow sand, and the sandstorm appeared on the traffic avenue. This strange desert scene appeared on the traffic road of a big city, which made people hesitate and confused. But someone immediately thought of the notorious criminal. It's the Sandman. Sandman. The people and vehicles on the surrounding streets reacted immediately and began to avoid being affected by the sandstorm, especially the money transporter at the street entrance, who immediately prepared to take a shortcut to escape. Unfortunately, the Sandman's target was the money transporter. Whoosh. The outer armor of the entire money transporter made a crackling sound, like rain hitting banana leaves, very dense, and then these fine sands shuttled directly through the gap of the car door. Inside the money transporter, there was a sudden sound of wind, dust and sand fog. Then these gravels suddenly formed a figure, that is the Sandman. The two armed men inside were nervous at first, but when they saw the newcomer, they said, "Sandman. It's you." But the next second, they were relieved. Although Sandman was a super criminal, he acted very principled and would not kill people under normal circumstances. Thinking of this, the security guard, who looked fierce but was actually weak, smiled and said, "It's you. We can't do anything to you, so take as many as you can get." His tone was very polite and well-reasoned. After all, physical attacks were ineffective, and it would be useless even if they had guns and bullets. But there was a hint of teasing in his eyes, and then he continued, "This is the Osborne Group's special money transporter after all, so you have to hurry up. The New York police and even the SHIELD rapid response team may be here soon." Sandman's heart jumped. Although he was an elemental body, he knew that he was not invincible in the world. At least he was very afraid of some guys in S.H.I.E.L.D. This was the Osborne Group's money transporter after all, so it seemed that he had to hurry up. But the next second he looked at the things stored around him, and they were not dollar bills, but gold bricks, which filled the entire wall, which was very scary. The security guard looked at his embarrassed expression and couldn't help laughing. He said, "Even if you become a sand giant, you can't take so much gold. What's more, you are still running with so much gold. So listen to me, just take those few pieces and run away." Another security guard also laughed. After all, they were private bodyguards of the Osborne Group and mercenaries dancing on the edge of a knife. Naturally, they had the confidence to laugh. The Sandman ignored the two people at all. After seeing so much gold, he just came back from the shock, and his heart was filled with ecstasy. Get rich, get rich. Then, he came to the gold bricks with a small sachet bag and began to put gold bricks into it continuously. The security guard on the side couldn't help laughing again after seeing it. This guy actually held a sachet bag to hold gold bricks. Is he kidding me? After a burst of laughter, he said sympathetically, "Uncle, do you need a bag? I have a snakeskin bag here." After saying that, he laughed even more. The scene in front of them made them forget that the person in front of them was a super criminal. But just as they were stunned, more than half of the gold bricks on the wall were gone. Hey! At this time, a security guard suddenly realized that there were so many fewer gold bricks. The $100. 120. The Sandman let out a sound of joy, and his hands were not vague at all, but he embraced the gold bricks in front of him and put them directly into the brocade bag below. 200. Another voice was heard, and the gold bricks on the entire wall were completely emptied by the Sandman. Then he went straight to another wall and continued to empty it. The security guards on the side suddenly looked deathly pale, looking at the small brocade bag filled with a mountain of gold bricks. They couldn't help but be shocked on the spot, their mouths opened wide. What is it? This is not a joke. In the blink of an eye, the gold bricks in the entire armored money transport vehicle were completely emptied by the Sandman, and they were all put into the brocade bag. Before leaving, the Sandman took a last look at them and said with great contempt, "Idiots." Then, his whole body was completely elementalized, carrying the brocade bag that seemed to be light as if nothing, and flew away. Looking at the empty carriage, the two security guards were still stunned in place. Thinking of the words just now, they felt that their faces had just been slapped severely. In the chairman's office, in front of the wide desk, 4 or 5 people stood in a line, their faces full of shame. They didn't dare to look at the chairman Norman in front of them, but stared at their shoes in fear. How many times has this happened? Norman did not suppress his anger at all, and roared loudly at the employees in front of him. In the past few days, his Osborne Group has suffered several terrorist attacks. Not only did several of its equipment manufacturing plants suffer damage, but even an armored vehicle transporting gold was looted. In total, the total financial loss reached as much as $2 billion, including the loss of gold worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Bang! He angrily threw a pen to the ground. Norman stood up and vented his anger. Thinking of all these actions, which were clearly a provocation to him, he couldn't suppress the anger in his heart at all. Sandman and Vulture. He uttered the two names word by word, gritting his teeth. The gloomy words seemed like the wind blowing from the underworld. He never thought that these two guys would dare to target him. It was simply inexplicable for no reason, and no one knew that the Green Goblin was himself, so what was their motive? This was what Norman was entangled with. Moreover, you actually said that the Vulture can be invisible. The Sandman has a space device that can store things infinitely. Are you sure? Norman frowned and said the doubt in his heart. The mercenary leader Horden wiped the cold sweat from his forehead and hurriedly stepped forward and said, "It's true. It's like magic, it's completely confusing, and there may be a mastermind behind the scenes." The mastermind behind the scenes. Norman pursed his lips and instantly thought of this possibility. Otherwise, how could these two guys suddenly attack the Osborne Group and suddenly have strange props in their hands? Moreover, this incident is too weird. The Evil Six were entrusted by their other identity, the Green Goblin, to bring Yan Chen and others back to them, but they didn't expect that this matter would suddenly come to nothing. The reversal of the plot was even more sudden, and it was the Osborne Group under their hands that was robbed by them. Did they know that the Green Goblin was the chairman of the Osborne group? Impossible. Norman shook his head, but no matter what the truth was, he had to kill these jumping grasshoppers completely. In that case, our Osborne group is not a small person who can be manipulated by anyone. Horton, call all the mercenaries you have. I have to rush to make a coagulation potion specifically for the Sandman. I also have the strengthening potion that Dr. Lizard left behind, right? Bring them all to me. Of course, I also need to contact talented people. At this point, Norman paused for a moment, and he suddenly thought that the super criminals in the dark might be hard to trust. However, this also reminded him. Since the power in the dark can't be trusted, why doesn't he mobilize his own power in the light? Don't forget that he is still a well-known and powerful figure. After everyone left, he stood up, walked to the French window, and slowly dialed a phone call. Then his hearty laughter could be heard. General Ross, I'm afraid there is something else I need to trouble you with. During the communication process, Norman's smug face was perfectly reflected on the glass window. Obviously, this communication was extremely smooth. In the meditation room of the duplex villa, Yan Chen was still practicing compound element magic without distraction. As the spell he was chanting in his heart suddenly sounded, the ripples in the air suddenly rolled slowly, and then, a wave of elemental tidal fluctuations suddenly formed in the air of the whole room. The wind element and the earth element slowly separated from the air and swirled into the palm of Yan Chen's hand. As the two elements combined, a wonderful chemical change was born because of magic. Magnetic property. Yan Chen's pupils flashed a glimmer, and then the metal objects in the whole space trembled. Compared with the previous few days, this fluctuation was stronger and clearer. It seemed that with just one thought, the surrounding metal objects could be used for their own purposes. Of course, it was not just that. Yan Chen sighed. He could clearly feel the fluctuations coming from under the earth. It was the call of the Earth's magnetic field. Then he quietly relaxed his whole body. But after a while, the whole body that was swirling and meditating on the floor slowly floated up as if it was weightless. He did not use any floating magic such as the light feather spell. He just used the magnetic field of the entire Earth to create a repulsive force against the ground to achieve floating. It was amazing. See, this is the application of science. A soft and gentle voice came from the ground below. Helen waved her hand and looked at the changes in front of her with a proud face. Since the preparation of the new research laboratory has made progress, she has more time. Afterwards, she was extremely curious about magic, so she went to the meditation room on the 5th floor. It happened that Yan Chen was practicing the magnetic properties combined with the local elements. When Helen saw it, she was even more curious. She knew nothing about the magic symbols and gesture changes. However, Dr. Helen has a lot to say about how to use scientific methods to master magnetic properties. After all, although she is a doctor in genetic bioengineering, she has also studied and understood physics subjects. Face Yan Chen, who had no basic knowledge, immediately had a headache after hearing her academic content. He turned a deaf ear to her words. Bang! Then, a book called Basics of Physics, The Law of Change of Magnetic Field, and One of the Four Fundamental Forces, The Application of Electromagnetic Force, two very basic physics books, fell in front of Yan Chen. Under Helen's patient persuasion and tireless education, Yan Chen gradually began to understand the mystery. For him who had been studying magic, it was simply a door to a new world. Afterwards, Helen also helped Yan Chen apply some scientific knowledge to his own magnetic properties. So, there was the scene just now. Very good. You have also experienced the repulsion of the Earth's magnetic field. Then the next subject is the manipulation of organic iron. Helen held a physics book in front of Yan Chen and began to explain patiently, organic organisms have a lot of trace iron in their bodies, which means that everyone has metal factors in their bodies. Have you ever thought about trying to manipulate them? Yan Chen was naturally a little confused about this biological concept, but after Helen explained it and compared it to the trace iron in the human body, he instantly understood it. Is there such a theory? Yan Chen thought for a moment that this was a bit unbelievable, but it also made him suddenly clear about a certain idea. If it really succeeds, it will be. Try it. Take me as an experimental example. Helen stood up. Her graceful and slender figure was clearly revealed under her tight clothes. She slowly opened her arms, as if sending a silent invitation to Yan Chen. Yan Chen put away the distracting thoughts in his mind and couldn't help but try the theory that Helen had just said. After all, in his usual use of magic, he basically communicated with the elemental power in the world, and never thought of trying to communicate with the elements in the human body. Of course, the most important thing is that there are generally no basic elements such as fire, water, and wind in the human body, so Yan Chen never thought about it. But after Helen's theoretical indoctrination, he realized that the metal element is different. It basically exists in the human body. Yan Chen's pupils slowly closed, and then suddenly opened, and a ray of brilliance bloomed from his eyes. Buzz! A magnetic field fluctuation spread out from the body. The iron objects in the entire meditation room instantly established a connection with Yan Chen again, and the buzzing sound continued to resound, as if in a thought, it could easily he loosened his control. Not only that, in addition to the meditation room in front of his vision, the geomagnetic field of the entire Earth reflects his own calling. Just now, Yan Chen successfully completed the floating by relying on the repulsion of the geomagnetic field force. But now, he does not need these magnetic field fluctuations. His sight ignores the iron objects in the meditation room and the majestic magnetic field force of the entire geomagnetic field. Yan Chen's entire vision is only on Helen. But it is very easy to completely eliminate external interference, but Helen's graceful figure and the size of the snowball that supports her clothes are undoubtedly distracting Yan Chen's attention. Feeling the burning gaze from Yan Chen, Helen couldn't help feeling a little shy, and her eyes couldn't help but droop, not daring to look directly at the pair of aggressive pupils. Although she wanted to curl up shyly, when she thought that this was Yan Chen's experiment, she finally stood up very firmly. "Hurry up." Helen's voice as thin as a mosquito came suddenly. Yan Chen took a deep breath again. It would be great if the woman in front of him was not so beautiful. But it was not the time to think about these things. After a few deep breaths, he slightly suppressed the boiling blood in his body. Then, the whole person's eyes slowly closed, and then relied on the naked eye to see, and the magnetic field fluctuations transmitted from his mind. After a careful investigation, he finally found the looming fluctuations in Helen's body. Really, although it is looming, sometimes there is no fluctuation. If you don't pay attention to it, you will fall. However, there are really metal factors in the human body. Well, according to Helen's scientific terminology, it is trace iron elements. Although this magnetic field the fluctuation was very weak, but it was real. Yan Chen couldn't help but feel really happy, because with his years of combat intuition, he knew what it meant. The human body is a very sophisticated flesh and blood machine, and the organs and blood vessels inside are constantly running like parts, so once a precision part inside is damaged, it will inevitably cause very serious consequences. Just from this sudden guess, Yan Chen knew what a terrible killing move this was. At this time, Helen also felt a little irritable from the bottom of her heart. She also understood that Yan Chen had successfully established a link in the body. Then she took a deep breath and said, by vibrating the iron element in the human blood, it can create a certain dizziness, and under certain conditions, the iron-containing blood in the human brain can be used to create an aneurysm. Helen recalled her own theories and kept telling them. But Yan Chen was indifferent, and then he looked at her and smiled, "Are you kidding? How could I do this to you? But my body's recovery ability is not weak either. Okay, no need to say more." Yan Chen waved his hand and made the decision directly. After all, he couldn't do anything that would harm his woman. "I really can't do anything about you." Helen sighed, and a sweet feeling appeared in her heart. She calmed down the ripples in her heart for a while, and then said, "Then let's turn to the next article. After understanding the iron element in the human body, let's look at the principle of magnetic force field." Then, the two of them snuggled up to the windowsill again, reading this relatively basic physics book together. While reading, Helen also reminded him of the difficulties from time to time. Soon, Yan Chen also began to gradually master the tricks and gradually used his own magnetic properties from a scientific perspective. In less than half a day, he was not only able to create a recoil force against the Earth through the Earth's magnetic field, but also able to fly along the Earth's magnetic field lines. This speed was far from weak. Later, some magic methods such as magnetic force fields and geological connections were gradually discovered. The magnetic force field provides a protective shield, and the geological connection can enhance the strength of one's body, but compared with some of Yan Chen's spells, these are not only similar to repetition but also slightly inferior in ability. However, Yan Chen did not feel upset about this. After all, it only provided him with a scientific idea, allowing him to deconstruct his abilities from another perspective. If it were not for Helen's theoretical support, Yan Chen would not have broken through the habitual rules all at once, excavated the mysteries in the human body, and discovered the weak iron element in it. This discovery not only made Yan Chen suddenly interested in science, but also made Helen beside him very happy. This intimate behavior of the two also made her feel very happy. Seeing that it was not too late, Yan Chen continued to study the magnetic changes under Helen's careful guidance. In the evening, on the rooftop of a tall building, Vulture and Sandman were standing there. In the night breeze, they were watching the traffic on the street below with their eyes fixed firmly. I received news that another money transport truck will pass by here tonight. Sha Ren smiled and held the brocade bag in his hand. He couldn't miss this windfall. It couldn't be better. We made a lot of money last time. Vulture also clapped his hands in praise, but a trace of doubt came to his mind. Why did the Osborne group transport money at this time? The hissing sound of sand echoed in the air, and then, like a gust of wind, a figure slowly appeared in a building. Whoosh! The vulture that followed immediately folded its wings and then slowly followed in. He just looked at the gray-white building body around him and the gloomy and lonely atmosphere, and he couldn't help feeling a little confused. Hey, this seems a bit wrong. A face appeared in the yellow sand in the air, saying, "It's okay." Quick battle and quick decision. Although they knew that the atmosphere inside the building was very strange, they were skilled and brave, and they still rushed forward without hesitation after tasting the taste of victory. Bang! Just as they went deep into the building, the sound of doors being locked kept coming. Along with it, there was the sound of machines turning on the power and a large number of people rushing in. Oops! Vulture knew that the thing he was most worried about had happened. Is it really a trap? The Sandman looked fierce, but still rushed forward. However, when it successfully transformed into an element and entered the armored vehicle, it found that the things transported inside were actually red bricks. Are we really being targeted? Suddenly, a series of footsteps were heard. Elite soldiers in neat military uniforms and fully equipped had surrounded the entire building. Vulture looked at these soldiers from afar, his eyelids twitching, and he cursed, "This. Are you soldiers here to be dogs?" He never thought that the Osborne group would send an entire army to wipe them out. At this time, he also realized the power behind the Osborne group. If they can't do it secretly, then he will kill you directly with real swords and guns. It's okay, I don't believe I can't kill my way out. Then, the Sandman threw the brocade bag to the vulture, and then the whole body was filled with sand and dust. The Sandman, who was originally as tall as an ordinary person, kept expanding and growing, and in the blink of an eye, he suddenly became a 5 or 6 meter tall sand giant. Obviously, the Sandman tried to rely on his physically ineffective elemental body to directly break out of the encirclement of the army. Bang! Every time the wide soles of his feet landed, they made a deafening sound directly on the ground. The ferocity of the sand giant was extraordinary. Even ordinary troops, facing such a giant, would have fled long ago. But the army that came together showed no fear at all, showing their terrible professionalism. Medicine. Spray. Bang, bang, bang. One by one, the shells flew in a parabola and landed in front of the Sandman. With a bang, a sticky liquefied gas quickly spread. At first, the Sandman thought that his body was physically ineffective, so he didn't dodge or evade, but he didn't expect that this condensed gas would make him very uncomfortable all of a sudden. What the hell is this? There was a bad reaction from the heart of the sand. Soon, the body that had been expanding was shrinking and quickly returned to a normal human body. Not only that, the Sandman found that his body couldn't be transformed into an element at all. This. HMPH. Go. Capture him alive. A muffled groan came from the army. The sound of guns being loaded continued to be heard. Well-trained soldiers continued to rush forward in a surrounding and closing posture. The Sandman was also completely confused at this time. He was undoubtedly just an ordinary person without being able to transform into an element. How could he face these soldiers now? Before he could resist even a little bit, bang, a soldier swung the butt of his gun directly and smashed the back of the Sandman's head violently, and a stream of blood spurted out. Impossible, Sha-Ren roared in his heart. He was actually injured. Then he felt dizzy and fell to the ground. Looking at this scene in the distance, the Vulture was also shocked. He wanted to wait for the Sand People to lead the way, but he didn't expect this to be the outcome. Where did this army come from? There is another one. Catch it quickly. The urging voice came from a distance. At the same time, neat footsteps kept coming from behind. Swish. Facing the army rushing from afar, the Vulture spread his huge wings without hesitation, with a fierce look on his face, and smashed the ceiling and wall directly. Bang! He broke through several ceilings and walls in a row, but he couldn't completely escape the entire building. They just went too deep inside, and the roar of the helicopter outside continued to echo. The Vulture's face turned pale. Even if he escaped from this building, what would happen? Is this young master going to fall here? He had already drunk the invisibility potion, but at this time, he suddenly thought of another prop given by his master, the door key. Yes, and the prop. No matter. Vulture took out a torn sock from his trouser pocket in a very funny way, but looking at such a sock with a big hole in it, he couldn't convince himself that it was a teleportation treasure. But at this moment, when he held it, the item actually burst into a faint blue light, and with a crisp buzzing sound, his whole body disappeared directly on the spot. Not long after Vulture dissipated in the air, a group of soldiers arrived late. They knew that the other party seemed to have some kind of invisible ability, so they all wore tactical goggles and switched to thermal imaging mode to detect the enemy. The empty floor was mistaken by them as the Vulture disappeared, so this group of soldiers searched very patiently. And while they were searching, in the underground floor far away, Bronsky, who was wearing a standing collar military uniform, was the commander-in-chief of this operation. He watched the Sandman being escorted into the vehicle, and a smile appeared on his face. Then, a figure in a suit and leather shoes slowly walked over. He yawned and said to General Ross, "Our chairman Norman heard about the victory and sent me to congratulate him as soon as possible." At this time, facing the representative of the Norman group, Bronsky was very polite. After all, this was a task assigned by General Ross. Since General Ross has personally told you, tell us the rest of the story. Horton wiped his hands and said, "I feel relieved when you say that. We at Osborne Group suspect that there is another person who is connected to these two behind-the-scenes mavericks." Then, he told the military representative Yan Chen's name and address. After explaining the matter, Horton couldn't help but laugh secretly. Since the chairman's dark power doesn't work, then he will crush you to death openly. Facing the entire army, how dare you refuse the goodwill of the Osborne Group? It's time to face the insignificance and powerlessness of one person. Swish! A gust of wind appeared out of nowhere, and along with a dense sound, the figure of the Vulture appeared out of nowhere in the field. Just now, when he tightly held the torn sock in his palm, he only felt a hook behind his belly button hooking forward with an irresistible momentum, and then his feet left the ground and flew up. He flew forward like a gust of wind, and he couldn't see anything in front of him. The torn socks in his hand seemed to have a magnetic force that stuck to his fingers, making him unable to break free. In the blink of an eye, after this dizzying sight, he returned to the original abandoned factory, and the army that had just gathered disappeared instantly. It's too amazing. Vulture sighed. The whole torn socks turned out to be a teleportation device. If you tell others about it, you will be beaten to death. Not to mention others, even I was a little confused just now. Vulture couldn't help but recall the scene of that meeting. This is a space treasure. I'll give it to you. I'll save your life at the critical moment. Yan Chen pointed a black magic wand at a torn sock on the ground, and then said to himself. After hearing this, the Vulture thought it was just a joke and even thought he was humiliated, but he didn't expect that this was really a treasure. Just like the name, Portkey, after the spell, with a light grip, you can instantly return to this abandoned factory from all over the place. Thinking of this magical effect, he carefully kept this torn sock as if it were a treasure. At this time, after suppressing his excitement just now, the Vulture's face was very serious, because the Sandman was actually captured. According to this posture, it is very likely that the master he carried on his back will be dragged in. It seems that he has to notify him first. Then he contacted the Night Walker, but asked this super fast-moving woman to go first. But even they didn't expect that the army had already rushed non-stop and came directly to the door. Yan Chen's neighborhood. It is Manhattan's premier wealthy neighborhood. After all, owning a duplex villa in the central city of Manhattan, where every inch of land is worth a lot of money, is not something that ordinary people can do. Therefore, even if there are a large number of military vehicles, in order to take into account the pressure and influence, they only sent a vehicle to drive slowly. But even if it is just a military vehicle, it still exudes a dignified atmosphere. The soldiers who came down inside all showed pride, because they represent the country's army and the face of the country, so this is why they are so arrogant. Soon, several soldiers with bulging waists landed in front of a vermilion door. Dong dong. There were waves of knocks on the door. At this time, it was evening, and although they noticed that there was no light projected from the windows inside, it did not prevent them from disturbing the door. Because long before they came, their elite troops had already mobilized various photographs and videos to investigate clearly, and the target person was still in the house inside. After another round of knocks on the door, they were already impatient, and finally waited for the door to slowly open. What came into view was a young and tender face. Looking at this young Chinese man with an extraordinary temperament, the group of soldiers who came to the door shook their heads, but felt sorry for him in their hearts, but they didn't know how this guy offended the Osborne group. So much so that they had to send out the army to invite him over. But they were just soldiers who obeyed orders naturally, so they didn't say a word. At this time, an accompanying person, Horton from the Osborne group, came to Yan Chen with a smile, and raised a thumbs up, and said to Yan Chen, "First meeting. You are worthy of being a young hero." Yan Chen's expression did not change, he just looked at him and said, "Who are you?" Tisk tisk. Horton made some small noises, then he introduced himself, Horton, the security minister of the Osborne group. On the surface he is the security minister, but secretly he has a large number of mercenaries on the dark side. After listening to this, Yan Chen suddenly realized and said, "So that's it." Horton looked at his calm face and couldn't help but sneered, then looked Yan Chen up and down and said, "Last time our Osborne group didn't have enough gift money, so Mr. rejected our kindness. But now, our Osborne group has put on enough cards and courtesy to welcome you to our group." The words were polite, but the content was extremely arrogant. At this time, the community suddenly welcomed a military vehicle, which also attracted everyone's attention. Many people walked out of the door and looked at the scene in front of them. This military vehicle belongs to General Ross. This general has always acted in a domineering manner. It looks like this little guy is in trouble. Isn't it? What a pity to lose such a good child. I don't know what kind of benefits the Osborne group gave to make General Ross an accomplice. Speak softly. Don't let anyone hear you. These people who were joining in the fun were quite perceptive, so they quickly figured out what was going on, and they all secretly felt sorry for the little guy. In order to consider the impact, Horton couldn't help but waved his hand and said, "Please." The soldier in front of the car also opened the door at the right time and welcomed Yan Chen in. Interesting. Yan Chen thought to himself, Susan and the others happened to go out shopping tonight, and he was just feeding the magical animals in the basement. He didn't expect such a thing to happen. But it's just right. It's time to make a conclusion. Then, he stepped down step by step and walked into the spacious military vehicle. Horton looked at his figure walking into the car, and couldn't help but revealing a sinister smile. He really didn't drink the toast and drank the penalty wine. No matter how tough you are, you still have to bow your head in front of the national army. Humph. After a light snort, he also followed into the vehicle. Soon, the entire military vehicle began to slowly drive towards the gate of the community. At this time, Horton completely tore off the hypocritical face just now, and directly revealed a hideous smile, and said to Yan Chen in front of him, "Smelly boy, stay in there honestly. Now I ask you, what is your relationship with the vulture and the Sandman?" He directly expressed his doubts. But Yan Chen's face remained unchanged, as calm as water. Too calm. Is this still a human being? Hey, now it's time for questioning. Tell me now. Horton roared. Really? In that case, now I will ask, you answer. Yan Chen's words came faintly. Chapter 91. I ask, you answer. Yan Chen's faint voice came slowly. Horton thought he had misheard the words, and immediately looked at him with a puzzled face and said, "Ah. Did I hear the words wrongly?" Yan Chen smiled. The next second, an extremely terrifying pressure was exerted on Horton's heart. His pupils were suddenly dazed, and his arrogant look just now was also pale, and his mind was blank. The imperious curse. An evil black magic, one of the unforgivable curses. Horton was unknowingly cast by Yan Chen through a wandless spell, which made him completely a puppet of his men. And the cursed will obey the caster's words and deeds. Yan Chen looked at the guy in front of him who was just domineering with a calm face, and then said, "Speak. Why did you, the Osborne group, go through so much trouble to let me go?" Holden's absent-minded pupils rippled slightly, and then he said very obediently, "The Osborne group has been vigorously following up on various human gene enhancement projects, so it has won over many people outside." Then Horton was honest and told some secrets. But this was just as Susan guessed. They actually came to me for the human research project. Did they really think that I was a small person who could be manipulated by others? After thinking about it, Yan Chen continued to ask, "What is the relationship between the Evil Six and your Osborne group?" Before Horton could say a few more words respectfully, the soldiers sitting next to him suddenly looked like they had seen a ghost. What happened just now? How could the arrogant Osborne representative suddenly become as respectful and docile as a dog, and so obedient to Yan Chen in front of him? However, after noticing Horton's face that seemed to be hypnotized and absent-minded, these well-trained soldiers reacted and reached for the guns at their waists. But before they could take out their guns, they found that their movements were extremely slow and stiff, and the record-breaking speed of drawing guns in the past was no longer there. "Ah, this!" A soldier cried out in surprise, and then he found that his body was covered with a layer of petrified color. Not long after, the whole living human flesh turned into a stone statue. What's going on? The driver in the front row of the military vehicle also noticed something was wrong, and then turned his head and saw the stone sculpture in front of him. He couldn't hide his panic at all. He rushed in angrily and looked at Yan Chen, roaring, "What did you do to them? Now you better drive the car and take us to our destination." Chen ignored his anger and said calmly, "What did you say?" Before he finished speaking, the driver, who was furious just now, suddenly lost his temper like Holden. After a moment of daze, he continued to drive respectfully and seriously, following Yan Chen's instructions to the destination. The military vehicle was still driving smoothly, accompanied by several other vehicles, but they had not yet discovered the secret inside. After a few words, "What is waiting for me at the destination ahead?" Yan Chen suddenly asked with interest. Compared to Yan Chen's interest, Horton still looked eclipsed. He still said respectfully, "Osborne's mercenaries and a few good players, of course, the army belonging to General Ross has not left yet." "Really? This is quite interesting." Yan Chen sighed silently. A row of vehicles slowly drove into a building owned by the Osborne group. A short fierce fight had just taken place here, and it was here that Vulture and Sandman were defeated. The former escaped completely with the help of the door key, but the latter was imprisoned. Soon, the whole row of vehicles slowly stopped at a place not far outside. Because the light was too dim, although it was not very clear, there were many heads and figures moving vaguely. Seeing the vehicles sent outside slowly coming back, the Osborne representative who stayed behind in charge suddenly became excited. The things that Chairman Norman personally instructed were finally done. However, even he knew that this young Chinese man was extraordinary, so he asked the nearby mercenaries to be alert, and then he ordered the researchers below to prepare for work. Blue sky yawned on the side. As a militant, he thought General Ross would give him a more interesting task, but he didn't expect it to be such an errand. What he called fun was, of course, a real fight, but he never expected that the Sandman was so weak that he fainted in a single blow. "Hasn't the Vulture been found yet? Why haven't you withdrawn yet?" Bulaski, who was not in a very good temper, frowned and started to curse. Logically speaking, their small army should have withdrawn long ago. But unexpectedly, it has been delayed until now. The soldier on the side was immediately ashamed and said with a trembling voice, "We don't know either. We searched the entire building but couldn't find the invisible Vulture." Of course, these soldiers didn't know that the Vulture had already teleported away, so they stayed here for so long. What a bunch of good-for-nothings, they can't even do this thing right. Brunsky didn't know why, so he thought his soldiers were not doing their job well. He then took a tactical goggle and prepared to find out the suspect himself. At this time, the car that had just driven in had opened its door. Click. A footstep fell. Yan Chen walked out of the car door and paced a few steps leisurely, while Horton followed him like a fool. Seeing this scene, the mercenaries who were preparing to escort and restrain the man were immediately puzzled. How could this guy be so relaxed as if he was at home? Also, why did the Minister of Security follow him like a fool? Didn't he invite a detainee? Why did he seem to invite an old man back? The atmosphere at the scene suddenly became extremely weird, and everyone looked at each other. The mercenaries who wanted to step forward to restrain the man were also puzzled. They looked at Minister Horton to try to get some kind of signal, but his deathly face looked like a paralyzed face. At this time, a voice broke the silence. You. What did you do to my soldiers? Brown Sky's angry words came. You. What did you do to my soldiers? Bransky's words were like thunder from a clear sky, which suddenly awakened everyone on the scene. Everyone's eyes looked through the door of the vehicle and looked at the driver's seat inside. They saw several soldiers in the back box, but they were motionless. Even though the noise outside was too loud, they were indifferent. Such a weird scene made everyone's breath suffocate. What's going on? At this time, a man moved his feet and leaned directly to the front of the vehicle. Just now, because the light in the corridor was very dim, it just made everyone notice that his body was motionless. However, when he got close to the window, he couldn't help but exclaimed, "Ah!" The figures inside were all petrified into statues. No wonder they couldn't move at all. This movement immediately frightened the suspicious mercenaries outside. They all adjusted the guns on their shoulders and aimed at the young man in front of them who had a weird temperament since he came down. They all became sculpture. The person who fell to the ground nearby finally finished speaking incoherently. Sculpture. Bronsky's pupils shrank slightly. Mutant. A thought flashed through his mind quickly. Then his body movements were extremely coherent. He quickly pulled out the gun without any warning words and pressed the trigger in his hand. Bang! A ball of blue fireworks came out from the muzzle of the gun. The smell of gunpowder appeared in the air, and then the whole bullet cut through the air, with a deadly wailing sound, and shot directly at Yan Chen in front of him. "Ha!" Yan Chen said softly. "Such a direct attack without hesitation, without giving people time to react, is quite interesting. Unfortunately, it is useless." Yan Chen added in his heart. "Get up." The temperature in the air rose instantly, and a burst of fire directly burned up the bullets flying in front of him. The entire bullet turned into a wisp of green smoke and dissipated in an instant. There was a sudden sigh from the crowd. Then more people were ready to pull the trigger. But at this moment, before they had time to think, Yan Chen took a step forward. At the same time, the firework totem that had not yet dissipated in his pupils flashed again. Boom! A stream of bright and uncertain phoenix fireworks rose directly from the air and suddenly burned on the bodies of the people in front of him. "Ah! This is..." Heart-wrenching screams broke out from the crowd. Then, their bodies melted away like candles under the burning of the phoenix flames. The speed of their disappearance was even more shocking. In the blink of an eye, the bodies that had been standing tall just now were reduced to nothing but a pile of black charcoal and soot. "What the hell is this?" Brunsky, who was lying on the ground, roared. Just now, he was the first to sense the danger, but he fell to the ground and successfully dodged, so that the fire did not ignite his body. Seeing the nearby group of mercenaries die quickly, without even a trace of residue left, he couldn't help but turn pale, but soon his heart was filled with excitement. This is a guy as scary as the Hulk. As a militant, Blue Sky laughed wildly. He was not angry but happy. He wanted to see how strong this guy was. Thinking of this, Blue Sky stretched out his legs and prepared to stand up with his waist strength. But at this time, a footprint came directly towards him. Bang! The body that just wanted to stand up from the ground was suddenly pressed to the face by a powerful heel, and then with a plop, the figure that flipped in the air fell heavily to the ground. "Sorry, you're blocking the way." Yan Chen's left foot had just left Bu Lengski's face, but his right foot had already stepped on his waist and abdomen. Crack! The sound of broken ribs suddenly came out. This is easy to understand. After all, the power in Yan Chen's body is extraordinary. As soon as his 2 feet completely left Bu Langsky's body, his left brain had already sunken a little, and the pits on his waist and abdomen were so big that they were shocking. He. Bronsky made a sound like a bellows, and was stepped on like a blanket. He was so full of fighting spirit just now, but now he was dying. He also realized that the gap in strength cannot be overcome by fighting spirit alone. Strength. I need strength. Before he lost consciousness, this desire still existed in Belansky's heart. Click. The footsteps landed again. Yan Chen looked at the scene in front of him silently. The battle just now lasted only a few seconds, and it was so fast that it was dazzling. However, in this short time, a lot of people had died. The person in front of him turned into black ashes. Yan Chen pursed his lips, and the fire totem floating in his pupils completely dissipated. Then, a sour feeling emerged from his eyes. Buzz. The sound of rustling continued to come, and the magic floating cloak was completely unfolded at this time, swaying in the wind at Yan Chen's back. Then, silently, a black magic wand slipped out of his sleeves and was held firmly in his palm. Swish. As Yan Chen swung his hand, a sharp whistling sound could not help but emerge densely. The mercenaries who noticed the movement were instantly cut by the invisible blade and turned into a pool of rotten flesh and blood. Ding dong. Not far away, a sound came from the elevator entrance. Why is it you? At the elevator in the corridor, a genetics doctor came out with a few of his men, dragging a cart. It was obvious that the bed was probably reserved for Yan Chen. Hey, where are those people who only have muscles in their heads? Why didn't they control this guy? As soon as the doctor finished speaking, he found a hint of blood in the air. Well, this. The students under his command looked at each other in bewilderment, but after seeing the pool of blood in the distance, they couldn't help but scream in fear. What's going on? The doctor's pupils widened, but when he saw Minister Horden standing behind Yan Chen, he immediately cried out as if a drowning man had grabbed a life-saving straw, "Minister, this is..." However, Minister Horden, who was standing behind Yan Chen, raised his gun. When the doctor and others were still feeling lucky, after a few gunshots, blood holes suddenly appeared on the foreheads of these figures. Plop! The sound of falling to the ground followed. And their faces were still full of disbelief. At the entrance of the corridor on the second floor underground, a group of soldiers looked nervous, their pupils filled with fear, and just looked at the elevator in the corridor. Major Bronsky is very likely dead. All the soldiers on the underground floor are silent, no response, the target is unknown, and it may be extremely cruel. Everyone, get ready for battle. Received. The voices kept coming in unison, but they were extremely weak. Ding. There was a vibration at the elevator entrance. Here it comes. Everyone's mind was buzzing. The unknown beast that was killing people on the upper floor was about to come here. Everyone recalled the hissing sound from the radio, and their hearts were even more frightened. The light of the elevator floor suddenly flashed, from the underground floor to the second underground floor. This distance was extremely short. It might take less than 4 or 5 seconds. But, gurgle gurgle, the sound of everyone swallowing their saliva kept coming and going. This short period of time was simply full of torment. Ding! Finally, another electronic sound came from the elevator. We've arrived. Everyone clenched their guns, but the sweat in their palms made them feel that their hands were slipping. At this moment, swish! After a crisp sound came from the elevator, the entire silver metal door suddenly opened slowly to both sides, and a figure appeared from inside. Then, the scene inside. It turned out to be Minister Horden of the Osborne group. Everyone burst out with relief. The scene just now scared them enough. I was so scared, I thought a demon was coming. Suddenly, he stopped talking, and pointed at the half-figure that suddenly appeared in front of him. Buzz! An invisible magic wave spread out from the air, accompanied by ripples from the air. Yan Chen's other foot also stepped out calmly, and the whole person's figure appeared here perfectly, just behind them. The devil is coming. After hearing someone's words, everyone realized and turned around, but the bullet in the gun chamber had not yet been fired. A soft red fabric flashed in everyone's eyes, and the smooth lines passed by everyone's eyes like a stream of water. Puff! The fabric that brushed past like a lover suddenly showed a cold edge and cut their throats. Accompanied by the sound of blood spurting, ho ho ho. Everyone covered their throats, but they couldn't stop the blood from spurting out. They could only make some hoarse sounds in vain. As their vision gradually blurred, they could only watch the red figure walking further and further away. Horden, who was riding the elevator, immediately took 2 steps at a time and quickly caught up with Yan Chen in front of him. As he walked, he said, "The military vehicle holding the Sand People is in front. This small force is almost empty." Horden, who obeyed the words and deeds, had long lost his previous domineering attitude. He was the most loyal servant, constantly guiding Yan Chen forward. They turned around one intersection after another. But there was no human figure. Obviously, they had chosen to retreat. Buzz. The sound of a car engine came from a distance. Want to run? Yan Chen smiled. After luring him here, how could he escape successfully? Isn't there a place for you to stand in the world? Just as the figure gradually blurred. Don't even think about running away. A roaring sound came from a distance. Bang bang. The loud vibrations of footprints hitting the ground continued to come, and the sound of these footsteps alone was enough to make people imagine how big and strong the person walking was. Sure enough, a giant man wearing an iron helmet and with muscles as knotty as marble ran quickly, and then directly crashed into the high-speed military vehicle. Boom. During the collision, it was like a thunder, and then the entire tough and solid steel armored vehicle head was directly flattened and dented by such a confused giant. The entire engine and even the front compartment were completely compressed and flattened by him, and the driver inside was even smashed into a meat pie. But the instigator, the red tank, was not hurt at all. Whoosh! A hurricane blew violently from a high altitude. Jehieji! A cold laugh came from the air, accompanied by the sound of flapping wings, and the vulture's words continued to come, "Your uncle is back again." Although he didn't contact Yan Chen this time, he moved 2 extremely terrifying reinforcements, so he was confident that he could kill the enemy. But at this time, his complacent voice suddenly stopped. "Grandpa, why are you here?" Without saying a word, the vulture immediately rushed down very respectfully and flattered Yan Chen. Yan Chen folded his arms and said, "Aren't you making a comeback? Then I'll just watch your performance quietly." The vulture was immediately embarrassed, knowing that his arrogant words just now were heard by Yan Chen, but he was a very smart guy, and couldn't help but smile flatteringly. "I'm not making a comeback. Master, you are the return of the king." The return of the king. This guy is really a good shoe polisher. Yan Chen was speechless after listening, but seeing that the situation on the scene was under control, he had other plans and was ready to leave. "The 4 of you stay here and clean up the remnants. I don't want to hear that anyone leaked the news." At this time, a beautiful figure walked out from behind Yan Chen, and the night girl nodded and said, "It will be done properly." Not far away, the red tank and the Sandman who had just been freed from prison had immediately started a killing spree. The entire building that belonged to Osborne was originally a trap designed to lure out the vultures and the Sandman, but unexpectedly, this trap became their guillotine. It was also the guillotine of the Osborne family. Yan Chen added silently in his heart. "Gone." After leaving these words, Yan Chen picked up the slightly dazed Horden, and after causing some ripples on the water, he disappeared from there. Apparition. Make yourself appear anywhere as you please, but when you cause others to teleport, it will make people feel more or less physically uncomfortable. After a dizzying moment, the figures of Yan Chen and Horden appeared directly in front of a black lacquered door. The discomfort during the teleportation just now made Horden feel uncomfortable in his stomach, and his mind was in chaos, but this also made him come back to his senses from the effect of the imperious curse. Looking at Yan Chen next to him and the surrounding scenes, Horden couldn't help but say in surprise, "It's you. How did I bring you here? Never mind, but be honest when you see the boss later." He forgot what happened just now, and there was a memory gap, thinking that he was going to bring Yan Chen into the office. Yan Chen smiled and said, "Honest. Okay." Then, he twisted the fat guy in front of him, threw him with one hand, and slammed him towards the door in front of him. Osborne Group Building. In the chairman's office. Norman stood in front of the French window, quietly overlooking the beautiful scenery outside the window. That's right, overlooking, in the 300-meter high floor, he had a full view of the beautiful scenery of the entire Manhattan City, and the stars in the sky were even closer, as if they were within reach. This feeling was really great. Looking at the city below, he seemed to feel that the entire city was under his feet, and looking up at the night sky slightly, he could even have an illusion of expansion that the stars and the moon were in his control. No, this is not an illusion. This is the taste of power, Norman added in his heart. But this kind of power that is as rich as a country is slowly leaving him. A touch of cruelty was reflected in Norman's pupils. His body was about to collapse, and there was almost no medicine that could save him. It was as if the heaven had played a joke on him. He had been given a fortune that could rival a country. However, even though he had invested a huge amount of money in genetic research, he could not solve his own problems. Why? Norman thought in annoyance. He then slowly raised his left hand. In the dim light, he could clearly see the hideous giant claws and the shiny green skin. Now he could not suppress the restlessness in his body at all. This was a sign of genetic collapse and a sign of impending death. Before long, his whole body might turn green and he would not be able to show his true face to anyone. Therefore, he was now biting everywhere like a mad dog, and Yan Chen was one of the dogs he bit tightly. Thinking of tonight's actions, Norman's dim pupils suddenly bloomed with a ray of light. First it was Yan Chen, then the Fantastic Four, and then Spider-Man. But at this moment, a loud noise outside suddenly interrupted his thoughts. Boom! There was a loud noise from the black lacquered door, and then the door that was originally tightly closed was forcibly knocked open by Horton's fat body. After a short and beautiful parabola, Horton's whole body finally landed steadily on the ground. Fortunately, there was a thick velvet blanket in the office inside, otherwise he would have fallen to death. This sudden movement immediately made Norman's pupils shrink slightly. Horton! Norman couldn't help but exclaimed as he looked at the figure falling to the ground. Then he tensed up and looked at the figure walking towards the door. The slightly immature oriental face and the slender figure undoubtedly awakened his memory. It's you. It's been a long time since they met at the graduation ceremony, but Norman still remembered his face, because it was him who completely defeated Dr. Lizard that night, which made him remember it deeply and couldn't forget it. Very good. You actually delivered it to my door in person, that's great. After seeing the visitor, Norman was not angry but happy, and said arrogantly. Then he pressed his hand directly on the phone, trying to dial the number of the security department outside, but no matter how he pressed, a dead tone came from the telephone communication end. Is it broken? A trace of nervousness emerged in Norman's heart, and then he couldn't help shouting, good for nothing. Someone come to me quickly. There are many armed personnel outside the office door, but no one has responded so far, only his own echo is still resounding in the space. Chairman, Horton realized that something was wrong and said weakly. How dare you? What did you do to them? Norman roared, and the little bit of nervousness in his heart began to spread throughout his heart. Click. With the sound of footsteps, Yan Chen's figure slowly entered the door. His light words followed, I just let them fall asleep. You. Norman's right hand trembled a little. The atmosphere was a little weird. When his pupils continued to look at the figure in front of him, he felt an inexplicable pressure. But he is not a pushover. It seems that he still has to use the power of the Green Goblin. However, Horton did not stay. Norman's eyes flashed with a hint of cruelty. Except for him, he could not let anyone know the true identity of the super-criminal Green Goblin. So, you are the Chairman Osborne who wants to see me again and again. Or did you use the Sinister Six to try to catch my Green Goblin? Yan Chen smiled and explained his purpose directly. After hearing this, Norman's pupils shrank, and then he said meaningfully, what an interesting guess. But did you come here just because of this little suspicion? That's right. For me, this little suspicion is enough to make me come to you. You. Hearing this, Norman was immediately furious. Holden, who was standing by, suddenly realized that Norman suspected Yan Chen because of Duluc's death, and it was just this suspicion that made him sentence Yan Chen to death. But he didn't expect that the scene in front of him was even more dramatic. Yan Chen, this young man, actually came to kill him just because of that little suspicion. However, if I was just suspicious just now, I am convinced now. Yan Chen smiled and looked directly at Norman. A tremor came from his mind, and Norman realized that his arm, which had completely turned into a green demon, was exposed to others. Looking at Horton's panic-stricken expression, Norman's eyes flashed with hatred, and his body turned into a sharp arrow. Without saying a word, he pierced through the chest with his giant claws. Ho ho ho! Horton looked at the bloody hole on his body in disbelief, and then fell to the ground again with a plop. If you want to blame someone, blame yourself for knowing too much. Norman shook his head, and along with the sound of bones frying beans in his body, his skin began to turn green, and his body became stronger and stronger. Then he looked at Yan Chen and smiled. The sentence just now was also directed to you. Come, Green Goblin, Norman shouted suddenly, and his rough voice suddenly echoed in the space again. But unlike the words that had no response just now, this time, a huge response sound was issued. Whoosh! A sharp whistle came from the air. The glider equipment that provided flight flew directly from a distance. The Green Goblin reacted very quickly, jumped into the air and stepped directly on the glider, and then opened his hands, and two exaggerated sharp blades fell directly into his hands from a distance. Without a trace of hesitation. When most of the equipment was ready, the figure of Green Goblin Norman came directly to kill. Although many people had known his other identity as Norman, they were undoubtedly dead. And now, the young man in front of him naturally couldn't be let go. The sound of the air being cut through suddenly rang out. Accompanied by bursts of rough laughter, the Green Demon's figure left a trail of afterimages in the air, like a sharp arrow rushing straight at Yan Chen, and the sharp curved blades in his hands glowed with a cold light, slashing directly at an angle. Yan Chen, however, remained standing in the same place, but waved the black magic wand in his right hand at random. Disarm you. The invisible wave of the disarming spell spread out. With a puff sound, the sharp blade that the Green Goblin held tightly in both hands instantly slipped out of his hands and flew backwards into the air. After the surprised sound, the Green Goblin, with his hands empty, had successfully come to Yan Chen, although the scene just now made him a little shocked and dazed. But even if he lost his weapon, his personal physical fitness was far beyond that of ordinary people, almost reaching the physical limit of humans. Even an adult rhino would probably find it difficult to withstand a few heavy punches. Without thinking too much, the Green Goblin punched forward with both fists. Boom! A violent collision sound suddenly came. At the same time, a sour pain came from the peak of his fist. The Green Goblin felt an inexplicable pain in his head, followed by a severe pain that made his pupils shrink. Ah! The Green Goblin looked at his fists in disbelief. Since they didn't hit him, they fell into his hands instead. This speed, as well as the strange magic just now, made the Green Goblin have a new understanding of him. Looking at the face in front of him, especially the smile, it seemed to be mocking him. Snap! Yan Chen didn't say a word to him. He twisted his hands and twisted his arms like a twist with the sound of bones breaking. Ah, how about it? Is it fun? Yan Chen showed a brighter smile, and a pair of strange golden vertical pupils replaced the clear pupils. The Green Goblin's physical data, which reached the theoretical peak of human beings, was not impressive at all in his eyes. After all, it was still not good enough in front of the dragon power. Without thinking too much, Yan Chen exerted more force and twisted it counterclockwise, breaking his two arms completely. Ah, I want to. The Green Demon wanted to utter another word, but suddenly, a flame burst out of his mouth, and his entire mouth turned into a pool of pus and blood. Well, now he couldn't utter a single complete word, only a whimpering cry. Yan Chen looked at him coldly, then raised his leg and kicked him. With a bang, the Green Goblin's entire body, like a broken puppet, crashed directly into the French window behind him. Bang! The sturdy bulletproof window couldn't even withstand the sudden huge force. After a crackling sound, it shattered directly, and the Green Goblin's body suddenly lost its support and was about to fall from the floor more than 300 meters high. Ah! A panicked roar came out. After half of his body slid out of the French window, the downward momentum was calmed down. Norman breathed a sigh of relief, and face down, he also took in the scenery of Manhattan below. According to the past, he would have felt proud of stepping on the city. But now, at the same height, he was so embarrassed, but he felt a fear that the higher he stood, the uglier his death would be. Such a contrast was all due to one person, Norman thought fiercely. He didn't expect this guy to be so terrifying. The weapon suddenly slipped out of his hand, the ruthless crushing force, this was not an opponent he could defeat at all. What's even more ridiculous is that he even paid attention to him for this. How cool is that? When you sent that housekeeper Dulik to find me, did you think this day would come? Yan Chen sarcastically said. Also, when you hired the Sinister Six, did you ever think that this day would come? When you asked the army to pick me up tonight, did you ever think that there would be such a moment? Listening to these words that mocked him to the extreme, Norman's face looked inexplicably ugly, and a trace of regret arose in his heart. Facing the moment of life and death, he couldn't just fall down. He still had a lot of money left in this world. Norman swallowed his saliva, and suddenly wanted to try to bribe this guy with money, but at this time, he realized that there was no one behind him. How did Yan Chen disappear? Looking at the suddenly empty office, Norman couldn't help but stand up from the edge of the French window, but he was full of doubts about where the boy had gone just now. Did he have a heart attack, or did he take into account his identity and let him go without saying a word? Thinking of this, he couldn't help but feel a little lucky, and then, a trace of viciousness floated in his heart, and today's revenge would definitely be returned 100-fold. Although Yan Chen is indeed very strong and mysterious, he will always have relatives and friends, and this is his weakness. Humph, just wait and see, Norman thought sinisterly, and he laughed inexplicably when he looked at the empty office. But at this moment, invisible waves spread in the office, and ripples appeared in the air. A voice followed, "Hey, Mr. Long, where are you taking me?" This helpless voice even aggravated the spread of ripples. Soon, two figures spread out from the ripples. One of them was naturally Yan Chen, and the other figure made Norman look shocked. Tony Stark. A name flashed through his mind. He could actually teleport, and why did he bring this guy here? Suddenly, a bad feeling arose in his heart. Who is this green-skinned monster that looks like a goblin? And where is this place? Tony, wearing pajamas, looked around with a puzzled look on his face. He was just about to go to sleep, but he didn't expect Yan Chen to suddenly pull him out of the villa. This is the Green Goblin. After Yan Chen's reminder, Tony suddenly realized. This is Norman Osborne too. After Yan Chen said this, Tony swallowed his saliva and looked at Yan Chen in disbelief. The place where you are standing now is his office. I pulled you here so that you can help him to destroy his company. Yan Chen directly stated his intention. He wanted to kill Norman directly, but inexplicably thought that this was too easy for him. But suddenly Yan Chen thought of the scene where Norman hurriedly killed his confidant Horton just now, and he realized how terrible trouble the exposure of the Green Goblin's identity would bring to Norman. This is really worse than death. Bang! Suddenly, a muffled sound was heard. Norman on the other end did not hesitate and ran directly to the broken French window. Committing suicide out of fear of crime. Run away. Tony had a thought in his mind, but the Iron Man suit was not around, so he could only do nothing. Of course, the most important thing was that the person next to him would not sit idly by. Come quickly. Yan Chen just uttered a spell. Then, the Green Goblin's body, which was running fast, was suddenly sucked back at a faster speed by an inexplicable force and fell directly into Yan Chen's hands. You wanted to leave but you didn't ask me. As he uttered each word, the sound of bones breaking continued to be heard. The Green Goblin's legs were twisted and broken by the wind. Tony's eyelids jumped, but he still thought of Yan Chen's plan. Obviously, there was a lot of room for improvement. After all, the fact that Norman Osborne was the super-criminal Green Goblin would inevitably cause a terrible uproar. The first to bear the brunt must be the Osborne Group. Over the years, because Norman has invested a lot of money in the Human Gene Project, but has not received a corresponding reward, this has caused dissatisfaction among many shareholders and the stock price has even fallen. If the identity of Chairman Osborne is revealed now, I'm afraid it will really fall from grace. There may even be the consequence of being closed down by the government. As the head of Stark Enterprises, Tony is naturally not a good man, and this incident is extremely just, and he is happy to see the dog being beaten when it is down. And this is good news for Stark Enterprises. After all, the two super-large multinational companies have a considerable conflict of interests. It would be fun if we could crush the Osborne Group. Tony stroked his carefully trimmed mustache and thought with interest. Now I'll leave this matter to you. Yan Chen patted his shoulder. He was more or less clear about Norman's fate, and then he was ready to leave. Seeing that half of his body had sunk into the ripples, Tony's ambition just now disappeared in an instant, and he quickly exclaimed, "Brother Long, this is someone else's territory, and besides, I'm missing a set of armor." That's right. Soon, the two of them quickly returned to Tony's villa, took away his iron armor, and returned to Norman's office again. Compared to when the two first met, Tony's iron armor has now been upgraded to a portable version, which can be said to be a rapid improvement. After Yan Chen said goodbye, only Iron Man Tony stayed in the house, and then he quickly dialed the phone in his hand. The Daily Bugle, right? It's me, Tony Stark. As a person who can almost support half of the media, Tony casually greeted and immediately attracted countless media reporters to the destination. What? Norman Osborn is actually the notorious super criminal, the Green Goblin. Soon, this unimaginable fact fell into the media circle. If it was someone else who told it, everyone might disdain it, but if the person who told it was Tony Stark, no one could ignore it. Just as the anxious owner of the Daily Bugle led the photographer Peter Parker to. Yan Chen had been away from the Osborne group for 10 long times. In Manhattan, in Central Park, Yan Chen strolled quietly on the forest path, feeling the warm and gentle night breeze around him, which made him feel relaxed and refreshed, and also calmed the restless heat in his body. Ever since dragon blood flowed in his body, he would inevitably need a period of self-recovery after slaughtering people and getting bloodstained, so that the restlessness in his heart would subside. After all, dragon blood did not only give him infinite and domineering power. That blood also had a certain impact on his character, his bloodlust, his desire for destruction, and even his desire for women. Of course, in addition to the dragon's lust, he also had a certain impact on his character. Gold coins, he also became inexplicably enthusiastic. Wow! In the warm night breeze, the sound of leaves rustling came slowly. As the Central Park in Manhattan, it is quiet in the bustle, but it is completely isolated from the hustle and bustle of the high-rise buildings outside. Yan Chen took a deep breath, stood up and stretched, and then prepared to leave and go home. Susan and the others were almost home. But at this time, Yan Chen, who was about to teleport away when no one was around, shrank half of his body from the air ripples, and then his eyes couldn't help but look at a figure at the end of the forest path. "You followed me." Yan Chen's words came faintly. After a period of silence, the beautiful figure on the other side made a sound and said, "Yes." Yan Chen raised his eyebrows slightly. It's not that he didn't know that she had contacted him before, because the connection between the two was too strange, so it was difficult for them to ignore each other. It might be a coincidence once or twice, but it was not a coincidence to follow him continuously. Does that mean she has something to do with him? Speak, Phoenix girl, or should I call you Jean Grey? After Yan Chen finished speaking, he sat down on the wooden bench again. Jean Grey on the other side was not as relaxed as him. Her delicate face looked at him solemnly, and then she slowly said, "Indeed. I am following you, but I also came here because of what happened last time. I know you were responsible for Magneto's death. It was you who came that night." Yan Chen nodded slightly, and was very frank. After all, the two of them had the intersection of phoenix vibrations in their souls, and they couldn't hide it when they were close. "However, I haven't made up my mind to tell them yet." Jean Grey continued. "Why? I know some superheroes value their privacy very much and don't want the outside world to know their identities, so I will keep it secret for you. Unfortunately, tonight I saw a vicious villain. How many people's blood has been stained under your hands?" Qin Zhe said indignantly. She had witnessed what Yan Chen did in the basement. "So what is the difference between you and those vicious criminals? After the professor wakes up, I will tell him in person." After all, she doesn't want to witness the birth of another Magneto. Listening to her words, Yan Chen smiled inexplicably. A killer will be killed. If it was someone else tonight, he would have become a test subject of the Osborne group, and the Osborne group has repeatedly provoked and threatened him. How could he not think about the consequences? Of course, Jean Grey didn't know these reasons. But it did not prevent Yan Chen from knocking on this woman with an overflowing saintly heart. "Well, you stay with me today." Qin Zhe couldn't help but ask, "Are you sure?" Of course. Once words are spoken, they are like spilled water. How can they be taken back? Yan Chen said lightly, and then his aura continued to rise. Chin Gele's heart suddenly rose with a hint of warning. Her brows knitted slightly, her lips pursed tightly, and then an invisible wave suddenly burst out between her brows. Swish! Under the attack of this invisible wave, the sound of the leaves shaking became louder and louder, as if a typhoon had passed. Mind shock. Chin Lei gritted her teeth. She knew the strength of Yan Chen's flesh and blood. While the two of them were at a distance, if she wanted to survive, she would have to end the battle within this distance. With this in mind, the fluctuations of this mind became more and more violent, and even ripples appeared in the air. Interesting. Feeling the external spiritual impact, Yan Chen sighed with interest. This was the first time he was subjected to external spiritual impact in this world. Attack. Then, with the support of silent spells, he silently chanted in his heart, Occlumency. Where there is light, there is shadow. The same is true for the spells that Yan Chen mastered. Basically, many spells have corresponding counter spells. Since there is soul reading to impact the memory in the mind, there is naturally brain occlusion to prevent external interference and impact. Brain occlusion is a magical art to resist external mental infiltration. With the support of the Phoenix Soul, the invisible shield that suddenly rose in the mind seemed to have substance. Buzz. Chin Gray's mental impact came as expected, and in a moment she tried to impact Yan Chen's own soul. Not to mention the bright and uncertain Phoenix Soul, it was difficult to break through the invisible shield outside. Ah! Chin Lei let out a muffled groan, her eyebrows furrowed, and the subsequent fluctuations became even stronger. Boom! The mental shock waves came one after another like waves, but the invisible shield that was like a dam only caused ripples, but isolated these huge waves. Defense is not Yan Chen's routine. Yan Chen outlined a smile, and then stepped forward. Click! When the footsteps fell, the whole person had disappeared from the spot, and the invisible mental shock suddenly poured into the void. Oops! After feeling that the target was lost, Chin Gele panicked. She had seen Yan Chen's battle that night. After this first move failed, her troubles were about to come. Compared with other people who were at a loss, she relied on telepathy to detect the other party's landing place in the first time. Chin Gele gritted her teeth and fell down quickly. At the place where she landed just now, there was a wave in the air, and the invisible magic wave spread completely. Watching this scene, Chin Lei understood it clearly, and before he could completely land, she activated another ability of hers, telekinesis. Boom! Another shock wave came flying, and compared to the previous mental shock, this shock was more substantial, like a storm, carrying the dust and smoke on the ground, and rushed directly to Yan Chen in front of him. At this time, Yan Chen's figure finally broke out from the ripples in the air. It was a deliberate plan. Chin Lei's heart flashed a hint of joy. Her accurate judgment allowed her to predict the location in advance, and then she calculated the time accurately and launched a telekinetic attack without hesitation. But the young man in front of him was not afraid at all. In a little reaction time, he waved his right hand in the air. What's going on? Not resisting. A few thoughts flashed through Chin Gele's mind, but no matter what she thought, it was good news, and she couldn't help but show a hint of joy. Boom! The telekinetic shock wave didn't give him much reaction time at all, and it swallowed Yan Chen up like a storm. At this time, the scene between the surrounding heaven and earth, but there were more pieces of stacked mirrors, like a dream. Chin Gele couldn't help but be shocked, and then this strange scene of heaven and earth only lasted for a second and quickly disappeared. What's going on? Chin Gray muttered. Welcome to my world. A faint voice came from not far away. Well, Chin Lei's scalp tingled when she heard these words. She looked at Yan Chen in front of her. He was not hurt at all. How is it possible? Even a piece of iron would have been broken. Buzz. The sound of the cloak fluttering could not help but come out slowly, and then the figure protecting him was revealed. It was the red cloak floating in front of Yan Chen that blocked the sudden attack at the critical moment. For this ancient monster with almost perfect physical defense, the mere storm of telekinesis might be difficult to shake. Jean Grey cried out in surprise. Was it a piece of cloth that blocked her attack? Could it be that this piece of cloth was even more durable than steel? Was this a joke? Looking at the sight coming from the opposite side, Jean Grey sighed, then turned around and ran. This was not an enemy she could defeat. The preemptive mental shock was ineffective. The accurately calculated telekinetic shockwave was also ineffective. To her surprise, this guy was also a psychic, so that after all these methods were exhausted, she had no chance of winning. Ta-ta. The footsteps slowly sounded on the forest path. Jean Grey took a deep breath, but she hoped to run back to the crowded place so that he would not dare to attack. Moreover, in the distance of Central Park was the bustling and lively city street, where there were crowds of people. He should always take some care. But could she run over smoothly? Suddenly, a figure emerged from the corner. Ah! Jean Grey screamed, but she was running at high speed and almost bumped into it. Fortunately, she stopped. But the young girl in front of her seemed not to be frightened at all, and walked past her safely. A trace of confusion suddenly emerged in Jean Grey's heart, and then she couldn't help shouting, "Hey!" But the girl just now still had no feeling and just walked on the road. This sudden change made her hair stand on end. Then, boom, a loud noise sounded from the side of Jean Grey, and she turned around and saw the most shocking scene in her life. The whole city was actually folded up like a piece of paper. At the same time, Yan Chen's words came faintly, "This is my world. Where can you run to? This is my world. Where can you run to?" Yan Chen's light words, like the vast sound above the 9 heavens, poured into Qin Gele's ears from the sky. Suddenly, ripples appeared not far ahead, and Yan Chen's figure appeared, and his words followed, "No one here can help you. You and they seem to be in the same world, but just like the other side of the mirror, you can never touch their existence." Qin Gele bit her red lips, standing on the busy street, but no one cast his eyes on her. "All the changes in space here are just based on my thoughts." As soon as the voice fell, the Manhattan City buildings that had just tilted up suddenly closed like a book, covering the whole sky and earth. Jean Grey raised her head in disbelief, only to find that the sky was like an upside-down steel forest, and the entire city building complex was actually printed in her sight. Then, she turned back, not daring to face such a terrifying figure. Even in Professor Charles's mental illusion, she had never seen such a terrifying change. Folding the entire city like a page of a book, is this something that ordinary people can imagine? Click. Jean Grey's footsteps continued to sound in the woods, but no matter how she ran, the sky was still filled with city buildings, and she was still shrouded in this strange space. Soon, Yan Chen's faint words followed, "No matter how you run, you can't escape from this mirror space. I am the master here. If you want to escape, you have to try to defeat me." Qin Gele didn't run for long before she saw a figure waiting in front of the grove. Before she could turn around and run again, the ground beneath her feet kept pulling her, and the distance between them kept shrinking. While she was stunned, Qin Gele had already arrived in front of Yan Chen. This space-shrinking method made her even more panicked. Looking at the young face that caught her eyes, she screamed in fear, and her body didn't have time to dodge. A pair of hands had already clasped her beautiful shoulders. No matter how hard she tried, she couldn't get rid of the pair of firm and powerful palms. Feeling the heat from the palms, Qin Gele didn't even dare to look Yan Chen in the eye. Because the phoenix fluctuations in her body made her feel flustered. Soon, the phoenix fluctuations that emerged from her body continued to flow into Yan Chen's mind. Yan Chen exhaled heavily, and his phoenix soul absorbed the power of the phoenix, but it continued to rise and grow. In a blink of an eye, the size of the soul had skyrocketed to the size of an egg, and the strength of the soul was slowly increasing. This power, it made Yan Chen intoxicated. This was a change in the essence of his soul. But at this time, Qin Gele's pupils couldn't help but emit a ball of red flames. She tried her best to suppress the heat in her body, and then said firmly, "You are indeed the Phoenix host. But, no, you can't absorb this power." At the end, her voice was full of fear. Phoenix host. Yan Chen had no such concept in his mind. Could it be because his soul was the soul of the Phoenix? But he ignored Qin Grey's refusal and continued to absorb the power of the Phoenix. Strength surge. No, this is a leap in life level, how could he let it go? This is why he came to this world. To become stronger. But Qin Gele looked at Yan Chen, who was indifferent, but she was full of worry. However, she could not break free from the huge force he exerted. She suppressed the strange feeling in her heart again. Then Qin Gele said very patiently, "Phoenix often looks for those with powerful psychic powers to act as hosts. You, like me, are one of them. This power is really too huge. It is so huge that we can hardly bear it. Moreover, this phoenix force. It symbolizes destruction and devastation. She will bring extinction to this land. After saying these words in a row, Yan Chen slowly opened his pupils, and an unconcealable flame fluttered and burned in his eyes. He pondered for a while, but said directly, destruction and devastation. Is this why you dare not accept this power? After being baptized on the spiritual level, he had seen the mental fence set up in her mind at a glance. It was this fence that isolated this power and also limited Qin Gray's ability to a certain extent. Obviously, someone was correcting her character in her mind, making her honest and docile without any bad side. How pitiful. Seeing the trace of pity in Yan Chen's eyes, Qin Gray felt inexplicably panicked, but she still tried her best to say, give up this power quickly. Don't absorb it anymore. It will not only harm you. It will also harm the entire world and even the universe. Listening to this profound and righteous truth, Yan Chen couldn't help but smile, and then said, the phoenix has never just represented destruction, it also represents rebirth and hope. I came to this world at the beginning of my advent. I was able to survive because of the phoenix's rebirth. So how could it be just destruction? You are too afraid of this power. And I can confidently control it. As soon as the voice fell, the connection between the two of them became deeper and deeper, and then the entire phoenix wave swarmed in, directly pouring into Yan Chen's mind and soul, and the whole body ushered in a warm current of heat constantly running. Boom! The phoenix soul suddenly burst out with a more fierce flame. When it descended, its soul, which had merged 3 souls, was originally very complicated, but now, under this baptism, the whole soul is crystal clear, like a red crystal. The purity of the soul is extremely rare. After absorbing the last wave of phoenix power, Yan Chen slowly withdrew his hand, and the flame in his pupils flashed away. At this time, Qin Lei, who felt exhausted, had already flushed her face, and her body was so weak that she collapsed directly in Yan Chen's arms. She calmed the restlessness of the heat in her body, but was surprised at the strength of this guy. After a long time, she raised her head and said, even if you can stabilize this power. But how can you survive when the waves of phoenix tide come from space? Moreover, when the phoenix really descends, you will not be able to hold on. After listening to this, Yan Chen looked down at her and said, really? How about I eat you completely now and see if you can hold on? Then I eat you. Yan Chen's malicious words came, and a thick burning breath spewed out, showing how restless the blood in his body was. After deeply absorbing the power of the phoenix, pieces of information also flooded into his mind. As a phoenix host, they can sometimes plunder each other's phoenix power. And just now, Yan Chen plundered the phoenix power in Qin Lei's body. However, the most original power is still flowing in her body. Of course, if Yan Chen is a little more ruthless and kills directly, he can indeed plunder her power perfectly. Qin Lei had a warning in her heart. Was he going to kill her? But when the two of them were connected mentally just now, it was like 2 souls were touching each other. They were entangled in each other without a trace of anything. This kind of ideology of harmony was more sensitive than the contact of ordinary flesh and blood. So, after the contact, her face turned red, her whole body was limp and powerless, and even a finger could hardly move. In this situation, how could she resist? Feeling her emotional fluctuations, a hint of interest flashed in Yan Chen's eyes. After looking at her delicate and ruddy face, his eyes kept sliding down to her bumpy body curves. Qin Lei's words did make some sense. The power of the phoenix did have a certain impact on the human mind, but now he was confident that he could control this power. But the boiling dragon blood in his body had not yet subsided. Under the torment of his mind and body, Yan Chen felt very uncomfortable. Moreover, after the fusion of souls just now, he knew the taste of the woman in his arms. Thinking of the taste he had just tasted without any intention, Yan Chen's heart was inexplicably hot, the flames in his pupils were rising, and his heart was beating harder and harder, as if urging himself to. Qin Lei's heart became more and more flustered. This burning gaze made her feel uneasy, and the burning breath sprayed on her neck made her skin pores tighten, and her neck was inexplicably red. This strange feeling, it reminded her of the moment when their souls merged just now. Qin Lei's heart instinctively refused. But the woman's subconscious thought just now was immediately fulfilled. Hiss. Chin Jay Lei's shirt collar was torn open, and the night wind outside immediately made the skin underneath feel inexplicably cold. Ah! Chin Jay Lei screamed. In a hurry, the mental power in her mind could not help but erupt, but even at close range, it could only leave some scars on Yan Chen, who did not dodge or evade. The mental shock also followed, but this wave was like a drop in the ocean, completely dissolving in his soul. Chin Jay Lei realized that with the help of the power of the phoenix, his mental strength had reached a terrifying level. But before she had time to think more, hiss, the whole person's clothes were torn off in a large area, and then around this small forest, walls rose up to completely isolate this space. No, the heart-wrenching screams and desperate telekinetic attacks only stimulated Yan Chen, whose blood was boiling. Just need an outlet. Then the whole person pressed down, using the sky as a blanket and the ground as a couch, slowly coming together with a muffled cry. A night of silence. Not long after the two of them had slept together, the scene changed. When Yan Chen had already woken up from the boiling blood, Chin Gele had already fallen asleep due to the heavy burden. The scene outside the window was still a deep night. Yan Chen silently lowered his head and looked back. On the messy couch in front of him, a plump beauty was lying. The surrounding scene was even more unfamiliar. The bedroom in this apartment, whether it was the furniture or the architectural style, was extremely unfamiliar. This is not my home. Before this thought completely flashed through, Yan Chen had already realized that this was the apartment of the Night Walker. After realizing that it was not right in the grove just now, he changed the scene when he was slightly sober. Of course, he couldn't take a woman back to his home, so Yan Chen pulled Chin Gele to the apartment of his subordinates. Dong. After a while, there was a slight knock on the bedroom door. Then, the Night Walker walked into the room with some takeaways in her hand, but when she looked at the woman on the couch again, her mind couldn't help but feel shocked. This is Jean Grey, the famous Phoenix, Professor Charles's student, and the most promising woman among mutants. But such a noble and dignified Phoenix was taken to bed by her master. What on earth is going on? Although she was confused, as a subordinate, she naturally did not dare to ask more questions. She just felt a little happy that her master treated this place as a golden house to hide his beauty. Master, here. Yan Chen took the takeaway and started eating right away. The Night Walker's eyes swept slightly towards Yan Chen in front of her, and she felt that he had changed into a different person. This change was not in his appearance, but in his temperament, as if just by being glanced at by his side eyes, the Night Walker felt inexplicably panicked, as if all the secrets hidden in her heart were known. The Night Walker didn't know if it was an illusion, but she didn't dare to say a word. Soon, Yan Chen, who had an extremely terrible appetite, soon swept away all the takeaways. Of course, if he hadn't secretly taken a few grain pills, his stomach would not be so easily satisfied. Looking at the night outside the window, Yan Chen knew that he was ready to go home. Before leaving, he looked at Jean Grey, who had given him the first time, and the beautiful scenery of the begonia sleeping in spring came into his eyes. But he didn't expect that after solving the Green Goblin tonight, he would have such an experience. I'll leave it to you. After Yan Chen gave the instructions directly to the Night Walker, he prepared to leave. The Night Walker was stunned, looked at Chin Jay Lei on the couch, then looked at Yan Chen, and asked weakly, "Is that it?" Yan Chen said vaguely, and then his body disappeared directly on the spot. Ah! The Night Walker looked at the air and felt a headache. When she looked at Jean Grey, she couldn't help but feel sympathy for this woman whom she had envied so much in the past. Was she abandoned after being seduced? Or was she ruthlessly pulled out? Thinking of the scene she was about to face, she couldn't help but feel a headache. Ta-ta! The footsteps of a group of people kept echoing. The people who came were all soldiers in uniforms, and the leader was the famous General Ross. He had gray hair at the temples and a slightly fat body, but it was hard to hide his iron-blooded temperament. "Where is he? Take me there quickly," he said directly in one breath to the oncoming receptionist. The receptionist swallowed his saliva, and then without hesitation, he led General Ross to a place quickly. On the way everyone came and went. One could see bodies covered with scars in this underground floor, and many of them were wearing neat and bright military uniforms. General Ross saw all this, his expression was extremely gloomy, and the people following him immediately knew that he was angry. And once he got angry, the consequences would be disastrous. After all, these were all his soldiers. No matter who did it, he would pull out the murderer behind the scenes. Thoroughly investigate the incident last night. General Ross uttered a few words. His words were gloomy, and as soon as he finished speaking, he faintly revealed a bloody breath, which was the momentum of an iron-blooded general. The clerk who followed him was suddenly startled and nodded woodenly. Then, "This is it," said the receptionist who led the way. General Ross looked at the body of Bruce on the ground and immediately said, "How did he get hurt?" As the most warlike soldier in the army, he could not imagine that Bruce was made to be half dead. The paramedic on the side hesitated to speak, and then he slowly said, "This is..." Someone stepped on him. Everyone gasped, looking at the bloody holes on his waist and abdomen, and the half-sunken head. This was actually stepped on by someone. Is this still a human? Another alien? General Ross couldn't help but think of the Hulk he had been chasing, and then said, "Is he dead?" "About there. He has lost consciousness. All vital signs are near death," said a paramedic. But at this moment, a sobbing cry suddenly burst out. "Well, General," there was a sound coming out of Bronsky's mouth, and this unusual movement startled the people around him. "General, I want to be stronger." The sound of Go Yanshin kicking continued to appear. General Ross's face was moved after hearing this, and then he nodded and said, "Very good, I feel your fighting spirit. The paramedics don't have to treat him with all their strength. Send him to the laboratory. Do we need to do that experiment again?" The paramedic nodded after hearing this. After watching Blue Sky's body being carried onto a medical vehicle, General Ross looked at his entourage with a gloomy face and roared, "I don't care who it is, bring any suspect to me." No one under my command, General Ross, dared to look him in the eye. After a while, someone said weakly, "Last night. The mission is to help the Osborne group catch 2 criminals, who are the primary suspects. Besides, it is said that a Chinese youth was also brought here. His name is..." But before the clerk could finish his words, someone suddenly ran over and said, "Oh no. Oh no, General. What's going on?" Looking at his anxious look, General Ross suddenly had a bad feeling in his heart. Norman Osborne, he turned out to be the super criminal Green Goblin. What? There was an uproar at the scene. Such a famous multinational chairman was actually a notorious super criminal. This is not a joke. General Ross wanted to question it, but at this time a clerk picked up the phone and said to him, "It's the senator calling. He wants you to go to Congress in person." General Ross was struck by a bolt from the blue, and his anger immediately disappeared. The Vulture Sandman and the Chinese youth were not the current problems. His most important problem now was how to explain why he helped Norman deal with the matter last night. How to get himself out of this incident. But, how could an Osborne chairman suddenly become a super criminal? Before he could figure out the reason, another call came from Congress. General Ross could no longer ignore it and left in a hurry, preparing to rush back to Washington, D.C. to explain. The Osborne Group has undergone a dramatic change. The chairman is actually the New York super criminal Green Goblin. Counting the crimes that the Green Goblin has committed over the years, involving hundreds of murders, the indirect damage to assets amounted to tens of billions of dollars. If his identity is confirmed this time, Norman Osborne may face hundreds of charges. This incident also caused the Osborne Group's stock price to plummet. On the contrary, Stark Enterprises' stock price has seen a surge. In the living room, Susan and Helen looked at the TV in disbelief. The two looked at each other, and they couldn't imagine that this would happen. Yan Chen sat in the restaurant and ate the food on the table in silence. Seeing that the incident had indeed developed as expected, he didn't pay much attention to it. After all, he was not very interested in worldly affairs. Puff! The sound of flapping wings continued to come. The owl retracted its fluffy white feathers, then landed steadily on the table and began to eat the food on the table. Seeing her, Yan Chen couldn't help but think that he should prepare to set out to find the discovered Horcrux. Recent events have delayed him for a while. But at this time, Yan Chen raised his eyebrows, "But I discovered a faint magical fluctuation coming from outside the house." "Whose is it?" After realizing that there was no malicious intent, I slightly retracted the magic spell of the house layout, and then let this invisible fluctuation fall into my hands. Buzz. After a ripple appeared in the palm of my hand, it was as if an envelope appeared from the air, and then hazy words began to be outlined on the letter paper. Soon, the contents of a letter were all displayed in the air. This is an advanced magical method of transmitting letters. In the eyes of outsiders, it is invisible at all. After Yan Chen finished reading the content, he already knew that this was a letter from the master of the New York Temple, Voodoo Daniel, but it was about Dormammu's urgent matter. I hope I can come tomorrow. Dormammu. This is his first #1 enemy. Since handing the matter over to the temple wizard, Yan Chen has not paid much attention to it, but he did not expect that things would suddenly become so serious. Tomorrow. Calculate tomorrow's schedule. I should be able to get there after retrieving the Horcrux. But now, this matter is not the most important. Yan Chen outlined a smile. It's time to have that power. Then, he slowly walked into the meditation room. Meditation room. Yan Chen's body has appeared here, and he slowly sits in the center. His legs are tightly crossed, and then his whole body is suspended in the air. Between each breath, there are wisps of turbid air. Then, the consciousness around him quickly gathered, without a trace of distracting thoughts. This kind of ethereal state was unimaginable in the past, but now he has done it. Of course, this is also the credit of the baptism of the Phoenix power. But it's not just that. After all, the Phoenix power is the original cosmic power. She can destroy and regenerate everything in the universe at will. After perfectly inheriting the Phoenix power, his soul is not only purified to the extreme, but also makes his spiritual energy reach a terrifying height. Telepathy and telekinesis are not very surprising. After all, he can easily do it with magic. But a more terrifying power is born. Atomic disintegration. Or decomposition of everything. As Yan Chen thought, wisps of dust filled the air. Everything in the meditation room was melting away, and even the ground underneath began to be eroded and disappear. In less than a second, Yan Chen looked at the walls around him, which were riddled with holes, and then he recovered the power with a little shock. This is the destructive power of the Phoenix. It is so overbearing and terrifying that it is no wonder that Jean Grey and Professor Charles behind her are so fearful of it. This is simply not a power that exists in this world. If I hadn't restrained my power just now, I'm afraid I would have turned all the nearby buildings and even everything into nothingness and dust. Yan Chen rubbed his slightly bitter and painful brows. Of course, this power was too intense. At this time, realizing the horror of the Phoenix power, Yan Chen remembered Jean Grey's pleading words. Indeed, when the Phoenix's tidal wave hit from outer space, his power would surge, but it would be followed by the problem of gradually losing control of his power. At that time, I'm afraid I wouldn't be able to control it as freely as I did just now. And, when the Phoenix really descends, this power will certainly be even more difficult to control. Even now, Yan Chen is not sure that he can control it. In his heart, he suddenly thought that the time of the Phoenix's arrival is not certain at all. Maybe next year, maybe 10 years, or maybe hundreds of years. But this is undoubtedly a fluke idea. Yan Chen shook his head. He did not allow himself to have this weak mentality. The Phoenix is not just a symbol of destruction, it also symbolizes hope and life. Yan Chen couldn't help but think of the rebirth of the Phoenix Fox a few months ago. It was the new life she gave. But perhaps there is revival after destruction. Why can't I use this revival power? Yan Chen sighed, and after several attempts, he failed to use the revival power that gave birth to hope. Restored to its original state. A magic spell suddenly came out of his mouth. As the invisible magic wave spread, the table with only a few corners left instantly returned to its original state, and the tattered scene around it was like a clock going backwards, perfectly restored to its original intact state. Click. Yan Chen, who was suspended in the air, landed directly on the ground with his feet. Now he has to start to master this Phoenix power. Only by perfectly controlling this power can he control himself when the tidal wave comes, or even when the Phoenix really descends. Control yourself. This also reminds Yan Chen of Jean Grey. The power of the Phoenix is rooted in the subconscious. When the emotions are turbulent, this power will also go out of control and surge. So this is also why Professor Charles, who is afraid, the reason why she set up a mental fence in her mind. Isolating the dark side of her heart made her perfect as a dignified and beautiful woman with almost no distractions. But the reason why people are human beings is that they naturally have all kinds of good and bad thoughts. This behavior is undoubtedly drinking poison to quench thirst, and even creates terrible consequences. After understanding her memory, Yan Chen wanted to pull out the fence in her mind, but let's not talk about whether she can control it, and he is unwilling to interfere. Yan Chen sighed lightly. His body came to the meditation basin, and through a wisp of white mist floating on the water surface of the meditation basin, he quickly entered a memory scene. When his vision was spinning, Yan Chen soon came to the library of Kamaji Mahal again, and in front of him was his past self reading and browsing. Browse, and this time the memory scene feels very familiar through the people around him. After all, he has been here several times. As for this familiarity, it is because he has come to the memory fragment of reading the Book of Vishanti again. That's right, the Book of Vishanti. Yan Chen came here again, ready to completely step into the threshold of the book. According to the past, the strict requirements of his character are definitely an insurmountable gap for him, because he can't restrain the ambition and distractions in his heart to become stronger. And the magical power of Vishanti definitely does not welcome such impure people, the so-called Slytherins. But now, Yan Chen smiled. After accepting the baptism of the power of the phoenix, his soul can be said to be exquisite and pure. Compared to that, he can easily discard all distracting thoughts, quickly enter the ethereal state, and no longer have any ambitious thoughts. With these 2 points, he undoubtedly had some small ideas. But this is also considered cheating. Yan Chen wants to use this to try to get away with it, but he doesn't know if he can succeed. However, no matter what, you have to try it. Afterwards, Yan Chen read the method of the Book of Vishanti again, and after repeatedly comparing it in his mind, he was ready to start leading the power of Vishanti to come. Along with the obscure magic spells in his mouth, the gestures of his hands continued to gesture. Every syllable must be compared with the changes in the gestures, otherwise it will fail. Not long after, an invisible magic wave spread out. A gleam of light flashed in Yan Chen's pupils, and then he said, "With the ancient body of hogs, the ancient name of Oshutu, Agamotto listens to me." As the last sentence fell, the invisible waves in the space instantly communicated with the will of heaven. Soon, an ancient and distant will slowly descended, and the entire library of Kamaji Mahal was suddenly caught in a storm. The power of Vishanti arrived as promised. But the next step is whether it can be maintained and used. At this moment, a desolate and distant will, wrapped in a majestic force, continued to break through from the distant and unimaginable dimension, and then poured directly into Yan Chen's body like a clear spring. Swish! The divine power of Vishanti swept through his own spiritual mind. Yan Chen frowned slightly, and then emptied his mind, without any other distracting thoughts. Then, this power suddenly poured into the body, like a clear spring turned into streams, constantly flowing through the limbs and bones, and the whole body was filled up in the blink of an eye. Vishanti's power still arrived as promised. But if the mind is not up to standard, it can't last for much time. According to the last attempt, it will be less than half a minute at most. 10 seconds. The power has not dissipated yet. Taking advantage of this leisure time, Yan Chen even cast a spell, Invisible. The whole body instantly rippled, and then became invisible in the air. This invisibility technique is more advanced than Susan's, because he can penetrate walls and other obstacles at will. Time continues to flow. 20 seconds. The energy in the body is still warm and flowing. 30 seconds. The theoretical limit has been reached. Yan Chen's heart was still in turmoil, because he knew that the will to spy in his mind had not dissipated. 50 seconds. The will that kept scanning in his mind finally receded like a wave. When the will completely faded from the spiritual realm, Yan Chen finally showed a trace of success. The calm heart lake suddenly became turbulent. It worked. Sure enough, he succeeded in deceiving Vishanti. Feeling the still warm breath in his body, Yan Chen continued to read the Vishanti book without stopping. Compared with the magic spells of other demon gods, the white magic of Vishanti was obviously much less difficult, so he understood it without any hindrance. A lot of time has passed. Yan Chen has also recorded a lot of magic spells, and the number of pages in the Vishanti book is almost infinite, so he didn't plan to eat a fat man in one bite. Soon, he withdrew from the entire memory scene. Wow! The consciousness returned to the flesh and blood body from the meditation basin again. Yan Chen shook his slightly dizzy head, and soon when his consciousness was clear, he began to practice the white magic he had just learned. Suddenly, invisible waves spread out. Ripples soon appeared in the air. As the gestures continued, the wave became more and more active. Then, Yan Chen said softly. This wave immediately reached a high point, and not far in front of Yan Chen, a circular black hole suddenly appeared, and then a terrifying spiral suction came from the hole. This is exile. Exile all kinds of creatures to another space. But there was not even a mosquito in this room, so Yan Chen entertained himself and soon practiced the rest of the magic. In the name of Vishanti, protect me from evil. Quote. Soon, the sound of Yan Chen chanting spells came from the room. The violent and frequent magic fluctuations even caused the wind to float in the air. Although the Book of Vishanti does not have many destructive spells, as a classic of white magic, it records countless magic spells, covering the fields of protection, healing, recovery, and gain. Yan Chen kept absorbing like a sponge, but spent the whole day practicing spells. After reaching evening, he was willing to walk out of the meditation room. After a hasty meal and chatting with Susan for a while, he still quickly returned to the room to practice. This learning state also made Helen, who had lived there for some time, not surprised. Soon, an evening passed quickly. Yan Chen finished a midnight snack, thinking that in addition to finding the Horcrux tomorrow, he also had to rush to the invitation of voodoo, so he did not continue to return to the meditation room. Under Susan's scolding, Yan Chen picked her up and prepared to go back to the room to sleep. The next morning, Yan Chen woke up slowly from his sleep, rubbed his sleepy pupils, and found that he could still feel the familiar body temperature in his arms. Looking at Susan's sweet face sleeping in his arms, Yan Chen showed a smile, and his hands could not help but slowly and gently stroke Susan's hair. It is quite rare to get up earlier than Susan today. Although Susan's unreserved blooming spring light made his heart move, Yan Chen didn't want to disturb her sleep, and then slowly withdrew his body and got off the bed carefully. After washing and dressing, Yan Chen's body has walked out of the house. Crackle, crackle. With a burst of sound, Yan Chen's body quickly disappeared from the original place. When he reappeared, he was no longer in Manhattan, but in Long Island, New York. Compared with the highly financial and economic Manhattan, although Long Island is far less developed in economic market scale, it is close to the coastline, with beautiful and invincible coastal scenery and pleasant climate. Therefore, there are many rich people gathered here, and compared with Manhattan, which is full of impetuous atmosphere, this area is full of comfortable and warm atmosphere. So many rich people work in Manhattan, but on weekends, they are still willing to rush to Long Island to rest and play. At this time, Yan Chen has come to an area of Long Island. Is this the place? Looking at the detached mansion in front of him, Yan Chen couldn't help but ask in confusion, because the distance was so close that he couldn't even feel a trace of soul fluctuation. This doesn't seem to be the place where the Horcrux is. Yan Chen felt something strange. Buzz. The sound of wings flapping kept knocking at her ears. Owl Kelly stood on her shoulder, calling out continuously. After Yan Chen finished listening, his eyebrows could not help but frown. According to her words, this soul fluctuation appeared and disappeared from time to time, so that sometimes it could not be captured at all. It was also because of this that she could not track it. Interesting. Yan Chen suppressed the strangeness in his heart, and then looked at the few people in front of the villa. Ms. Tina, I like this villa very much, but I have heard that there are many ghosts here, and when I was walking around the house just now, I always felt an inexplicable chill in my body. Mr. Bolton, this is absolutely a rumor. It may be because of the cold weather. The real estate agent, Ms. Tina, kept explaining. At this time, Yan Chen also walked over. Ms. Tina, no matter what, this room is still too cold and eerie. And I have heard that many strange things happened in there. The previous tenants moved out because of the strange things inside. Am I right? Mr. Bolton told these things. Ms. Tina, who was a real estate agent, could understand the story. The sudden footsteps in the building in the middle of the night. And the laughter of the little girl. The girl in red flashed by the night curtains. Handprints on the bathroom mirror. The music box that started inexplicably. These supernatural and terrifying incidents have been reported by the previous residents. Tina couldn't help but feel scared when she thought about how they left in a hurry after less than a week. Listening to Mr. Bolton's questioning words, Ms. Tina didn't know how to answer. But it is not without a solution. How about this? You can't sell it anyway, I can consider the price. Mr. Bolton's pupils revealed a hint of cunning. As a staunch materialist, how could he believe those ghost legends? What he said just now, that he felt a chill when he entered the house, was just a fabrication. Are you kidding? This is a rare single-family villa in Long Island. It is not only close to the sea, but also surrounded by lush woods. It is quiet in a bustling city, but also luxurious. It is equipped with a swimming pool and a lawn. It is extremely luxurious. He said so much just now, but it was just to lower the price. Ms. Tina was also very embarrassed. This house has been vacant for a long time, and she was not sure whether to lower the selling price again. If the price is reduced. Before Tina finished speaking, a faint voice came from the side. Well, this villa is nice. I bought it right away. Ah, hearing this, Ms. Tina turned sideways and looked at the boy beside her. Although she had noticed him just now, she thought he was just one of the teenagers watching, so she ignored him. But she didn't expect that this boy actually buy this house. This is not a joke. Mr. Bolton, who was standing by, saw the troublemaker and said angrily, "Where did you come from, young man? Can you buy this house?" Yan Chen ignored him and continued with a smile, "I don't need to lower the price, just give me the full price and transfer it to me now." What? Mr. Bolton swallowed his breath and said in disbelief. As a real estate agent, Ms. Tina has seen countless people. Looking at this man with extraordinary temperament and charming face, she was overwhelmed with emotion but also somewhat convinced. Then she smiled professionally, "I'll contact him now." Seeing that Tina had quickly reached an agreement with this pretty boy, he was furious. He never thought that the house would be taken away like this. He wanted to say more. But he was suddenly stunned, and then said anxiously, "By the way, my wife seems to be giving birth at home. Go home quickly." Then, without waiting for a reply, Bolton hurriedly led his entourage and left. This change made Tina inexplicably stunned. What was going on? "Okay, you can go back too. Come back to me after you get the contract." Yan Chen couldn't help but look at the lady beside him, and his eyes couldn't help but meet her. Tina felt her mind shaken, as if his words were an imperial decree, and then nodded, but left quickly. After sending these two people away, Yan Chen outlined a smile, but walked straight into the villa. Since he saw the house for the first time, he felt that something was wrong inside, and then after hearing their stories about the supernatural horror inside, he also confirmed his thoughts. Buzz. The door slowly opened, and Yan Chen walked in. The decorative furniture inside was dust-free, and it was obviously specially cleaned. But the weird thing is that it is obviously early in the morning, but the atmosphere inside is dim, with only a little light in it. Could it be that when they were looking at the house just now, they closed the windows like this? Door. Suddenly, "Caw," a fine sound suddenly came. Yan Chen raised his eyebrows, but looked at the source of the sound, only to see a window inexplicably closed. This was also the last window. After closing this window, the only remaining light disappeared instantly. There was a dim color in front of him. Interesting. Yan Chen looked at the red cloth flashing by the edge of the curtain, and slowly followed it. Click. The unhurried footsteps suddenly echoed in this space. Pushing open the small door, a dim and slender figure fell into it, and then Yan Chen appeared in the corridor. Not even a few steps. The gap in the door that was not closed tightly on the side suddenly let out a whimpering wind, which was particularly harsh in this empty corridor. Yan Chen was not afraid but happy, but opened the door, and the gloomy wind suddenly blew in his face, but he still followed closely. "Come on, come out and play with your brother." A red-dressed figure appeared again at the corner of the stairs. But it quickly disappeared, as if it was an illusion. Ta-ta. The sound of footsteps came from the stairs, and soon Yan Chen appeared on the second floor. A gust of cold wind suddenly filled his body again. He ignored it, but the blood in his body revived slightly, and the hot dragon blood breath suddenly made a hissing sound around him, and the yin energy that swept over him dissipated immediately. "Don't run away. Come and play with your brother." Yan Chen smiled, which confirmed his guess. It was really interesting. There were only 2 houses on both sides of the corridor on the 2nd floor. Wow! Suddenly, the shadow under him began to sway constantly, and then a black object suddenly disappeared silently. When Yan Chen approached, a door suddenly opened, and a beautiful figure appeared in front of him. Arya shook her head and pointed to the door opposite. She's hiding inside. Yan Chen smiled and looked at the locked door. He just whispered, "Open the door." Then, the locked door clicked and opened automatically. Although the light in the bedroom was dim, it was still possible to see that this was a little girl's boudoir, with a pink tone and full of elaborate decorations for girls. On one side of the wall was a large display window with all kinds of dolls on display. Gurgle. Arya swallowed her saliva, and a chill rose in her heart, because all the dolls on the wall were looking at her. But as the owner of the shadow, how could she be frightened? Just as she was about to jump up and sweep away these weird dolls. Disperse. An invisible wave of magic suddenly spread throughout the house. The doll that was acting strangely just now suddenly returned to normal. Then, Yan Chen looked at the window, and a touch of red cloth on the curtains exposed her figure. "Come out." The atmosphere froze instantly. Suddenly. Swish. A flash of red cloth suddenly passed by, and the figure of a little girl instantly came into everyone's sight. When Arya saw the real owner appear, she thought of the frightened scene just now, and she walked forward in anger. But before she took a few steps, a voice suddenly rang out. All petrified. As soon as the words fell, Arya's body, which had turned into a residual shadow, was as if it was stuck in a quagmire and could not move. Then it continued to stiffen and solidify, and the body could not move. Alia's head was filled with shock, and she looked at Yan Chen beside her. "It's not me." As expected, Yan Chen smiled and silently chanted a counter-spell in his heart, and Arya's petrified body disappeared. Seeing this scene, the little girl in red was filled with fear on her face. She looked at the figure gradually approaching and then said in panic, "Disarm you. This spell is not used correctly." The disarming spell only caused ripples on his body. Hanging bell. The childish voice sounded again. Yan Chen shook his head and said, "This is really damaging to my demeanor." Then he waved his right hand, and a wave of magic hit the oncoming water ripples, neutralizing the magic effect. All petrified, the little girl said again. "Haven't you learned your lesson yet?" Yan Chen walked forward a few steps without being disturbed. This strange scene and the extremely oppressive figure made her unable to suppress the panic in her heart. She said in a trembling voice, "Hurry up, hurry up." Shrink. Yan Chen shook his head, and this time even the magic fluctuations did not occur. "You are too afraid. So you use magic. Besides, where are your attack spells?" As soon as the harsh words fell, Yan Chen's aura continued to awe. The little girl screamed, squatted on the ground, and suddenly roared, "Thunder explosion." Flames are blazing. 2 spells burst out in succession. With a crisp bang, another flame burned on Yan Chen's body. The flame surged fiercely, but also disappeared quickly, leaving only a wisp of smoke. Click. A sound of footsteps sounded, and Yan Chen, who was safe and sound, had come to the little girl. Or in front of a ghost girl. The cute and young girl in front of him appeared in his sight with a faded and blurred figure, without a trace of flesh and blood, and it was obviously a ghost body. "Ah!" The little girl screamed again, and then tried to drill through the ground. For her as a ghost, it was very easy to shuttle through everything. But before she could completely drill through half of her body, Yan Chen grabbed her little hand and pulled her back. Well, the little girl couldn't believe it, and her aggrieved face was about to burst into tears. Logically speaking, she couldn't be touched by anyone, but how did he catch me? Invisible, the little girl thought to herself. But her body did not become invisible as she wished, as if the hand holding her arm had some kind of imprisoning power. Compared to her panic, Yan Chen looked at the little girl with joy, and said to himself, "This is another girl with wizard qualifications. It is also because of this that she can use her magic spells." That's right. Her ghost body actually integrated a piece of her soul fragment, which is why she can use her own magic. Of course, it would not work without her own wizard qualifications. Of course, Yan Chen was sure that she had wizard qualifications. In addition to her ability to use magic, it was her ghost body. A wizard can choose to stay in this world after death, and only a wizard can come back as a ghost. You are afraid of death, so you choose to stay here. But ghosts can only walk helplessly in the places where they have lived and walked. Few wizards will choose this path. Yan Chen looked at her and said these words. In his previous life, there were many ghosts wandering around Hogwarts. Neither the underworld nor the world of the living would accept them, so they could only wander alone in the human world, which was still a very painful thing. So not many wizards choose to stay. But unexpectedly, this little girl with magical qualifications unexpectedly stayed here after her death, and even more unexpectedly, she absorbed a piece of her own soul fragment. The probability of this is simply miracle. What's your name? Looking at this little girl, little ghost, and even her own alternative Horcrux, Yan Chen said with a smile. But the scene just now really made her a little panicked, so she was stunned for a long time, but couldn't say a word. Yan Chen took it all in, and then her soul couldn't help but emit fluctuations, and a ray of divine thought touched her spirit body. Ah! The little girl raised her head and looked at him in surprise. A blood thicker than water intimacy connected the two of them emotionally. Looking at that handsome face, the little girl gradually calmed down her fear and said tentatively, Perona. Perona. Yan Chen silently repeated the name several times in his heart. Then he smiled and said, it's a nice name. Hearing these words of praise, Perona's tender and delicate face suddenly overflowed with a smile. The breath coming from the man in front of her actually made her feel dependent. As if she, just like his sister, his daughter. Thinking of this, Perona's pale face actually flushed. Seeing that she was calm, Yan Chen continued, I'm not here to kill you. I have bought this place, and no one can harass you from now on. After hearing this, Perona became even more delighted. After all, she had driven away several families because she didn't want them to move into her home and touch anything in her home. Thank you, Perona said with a blushing face. Alia, who was watching this scene, was also very surprised. Chen had never thought that his Horcrux could actually be a ghost girl. As for whether it was because of his soul fragments that created this ghost creature, or because of his own reasons, Yan Chen did not know. Before he had time to ask carefully, a sound came from the floor below. Ta-ta. Footsteps sounded in the hall below. Are you still here? The voice of Ms. Tina, the real estate agent, came. When the little girl Perone heard it, she suddenly became nervous. Don't worry. After signing the contract with them, this house will be yours. Yan Chen said soothingly. Since she was afraid of being disturbed by living beings, it was also a wish of hers to be fulfilled. After hearing this, Perona nodded with a red face. Soon, Yan Chen went downstairs to sign a contract agreement. The purchase price of more than $20 million was not a problem for him, so he bought it in full. After sending them away, Yan Chen looked at the curtains in the corner. Perona, as a ghost, generally cannot be seen by outsiders. In addition, she has the ability to shuttle easily and freely, and even become invisible. Ha! Perona breathed a sigh of relief, and then her body slipped out from the curtains. He heaved a sigh of relief. Yan Chen nodded secretly. He did not plan to recover this alternative Horcrux. The increase in soul strength could not bring him much increase in strength. It was far less than the changes brought by the power of the Phoenix or even the power of Vishanti. So, in this case, he had no intention of recovering her soul fragment. Moreover, by recovering it, Yan Chen did not know whether her spirit would be shaken and completely dissipated. Moreover, after seeing another girl with wizard qualifications, Yan Chen secretly made up his mind and planned to take Perona back as his apprentice, and was ready to recreate the magic glory of his previous world here. Then you will be my student in the future. Yan Chen touched her head. But Perona lowered her head, looking at her toes shyly, feeling the familiar fluctuations coming from the front, but in her heart she had already regarded Yan Chen as a relative. Then the two began to talk, and Alia, who exuded a charming aura, watched quietly. Through this verbal communication, Yan Chen also understood the release of Perona's magic. As early as before she accepted her soul fragment, some clues had appeared when she was 5 or 6 years old. For example, when she was angry, she inexplicably generated a wave of telekinesis. Even when she hated to the extreme and her emotions were out of control, she would burst into a flame. Yan Chen also had some estimates in his heart, and he knew more or less although Perona's magical talent is far inferior to his own, it is also beyond most wizards. After all, at an ignorant age, she was able to burst out magic power without the guidance of gestures and spells, which was enough to show her potential as a wizard. Of course, Yan Chen did not have these experiences. Generally, it was only when a wizard suffered in childhood that the magic power in the body would be awakened. But now the important thing is that he has to guide Perona's magic power. After all, a piece of his soul fragment has been fused into her body, and there is a strong magic wave in it. This is enough to be overwhelming for her weak body, so Yan Chen needs her to control it. If it cannot be properly controlled, it may become a terrible magical creature. Silently. Then, Yan Chen suddenly pulled out several magic books from the space equipment. Open double angle bracket Beginner's Guide to Transfiguration Close double angle bracket. Open double angle bracket Standard Spells, Elementary Close double angle bracket. Open double angle bracket Modern History of Magic Close double angle bracket. Open double angle bracket Magic Theory Close double angle bracket. Open double angle bracket Dark Power, A Guide to Self-Defense. These books were basically elementary magic books selected by Yan Chen, which gave her a clear understanding of her own magic. Yan Chen also took out his patience in alchemy and told her some magic tips. When the two of them were talking passionately, Perona, who was shy at first, had already listened with eyes full of enthusiasm. Her young face was full of seriousness. Yan Chen saw it and realized that half a day had passed. Thinking of the invitation from Voodoo Daniel today, he was already quite late, so he planned to say goodbye and leave. Okay, that's it. I'll come over the day after tomorrow to check on your results. Yan Chen stretched and then waved to her. Bye. Perona twisted the doll in her hand and shook her hand. After taking a last look at her, Yan Chen's figure had disappeared in the house. Greenwich Village, New York. 177A Bleecker Street in the outskirts of the city is where the New York Temple of Kamaji Mahal is located. At this time, a group of guys in wizard robes were walking in the evening streets with great fanfare. Such a large-scale action also meant that they encountered a very difficult problem. Suddenly, a black magic black hole appeared in the air, accompanied by a terrible spiral force, and hideous monsters ran out of it. The fourth time, Voodoo Daniel said through gritted teeth. This was the fourth time that the space channel appeared. Looking at the group of oncoming lost minds, he couldn't help but feel very difficult. Ordinary mages were no match for them in terms of flesh and blood strength. The hideous bulging muscles undoubtedly demonstrated this. What was even more troublesome was that this group of lost minds under Dormammu came for the temple, so that the members of their entire New York temple basically came out in full force. Because the three temples in New York, London, and Hong Kong are not only construction bases, but also the protective magic array set up by Agamotto on the Earth. So once they are destroyed, the consequences will be unimaginable, and the first to bear the brunt must be the coming of Dormammu, Lord of the Dark Dimension. Palace Master. Look. But at this moment, another space channel suddenly appeared in the air. Voodoo Daniel's scalp tingled. Could it be that another group of insane demons came? No, this magical fluctuation, is it from one of our own? Could it be Yan Chen? The answer was soon revealed. Unexpectedly, a group of people came out of the space gate, and the wizard robes on their bodies were obviously from our own. It's them. They are members of the expedition team. I heard that they followed the Ancient One to fight monsters from other dimensions. Why are they back now? People around saw and recognized them, and exclaimed. Being able to freely travel through different dimensions to fight and become a member of the expedition team is the dream of these temple mages. I hope everyone will support it and subscribe more.